Let's sing a song full of hope, full of pain. Why don't you sing along, my friend? For it's our last refrain. Forever young, ever strong, ever brave. Memories like this never end. No, they don't fade away. So when I'm gone, oh, when I'm gone, I'll be right there, close to the sun. Keep holding on, keep holding on, and I'll be right there, close to the sun, close to the sun. Close to the sun. Here's to the ones who let shine through the rain. The ones who stood for something more. We won't forget your names. The tide is high, say goodbye, we set it sail. And all those midnight secrets told, we'll take them to the grave. So when I'm gone, oh, when I'm gone, I'll be right there, close to the sun. Keep holding on, and I'll be right there, close to the sun, close to the sun. So when I'm gone, oh, when I'm gone, I'll be right there, close to the sun. Keep holding on, and I'll be right there, close to the sun, close to the sun.
Hello.
Hello. I have so many mutes. Oh my gosh. Okay. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I don't think my face rig's working, but other than that, I'm good.
It's not tracking your lips.
I know. It's broken. My face rig is
cool.
broken. Yeah. So, like, true story, I got bit by mosquitoes on my face and my face swelled up and I look like I have broken out acne, but it's like mosquito bites, like 4 of them on my face right now. So I'm like, I'm not going to get on camera. So I put on face rig, but it's not tracking my lips. I'm really sad. I'll have to calibrate it, I guess. Anyway.
I use that. Remember when I used to use that program all the time?
Yeah, you were
Like
the cat or something, I think, usually.
No, I was that one there. I had
Raccoon?
I had it, but it looked like a raccoon there. But it was always great because the only people that use that type of software was like myself and Concordance use something similar. And just getting into a room and just having people just argue theology with a raccoon is just hilarious.
Yeah.
There's still on Skylar Fiction's channel. There's still a video of a discussion me and Beckel were having, and about essentially whether or not God dictates all evil, like all events, like if God has determined all events out there, and by the nature of God, whether or not those all those events would have to be therefore good, and whether or not there was any ground to say that any type of crime or anything that happens against you can ever be said to be evil if it falls in accordance with God's plan and all this other crap. But I every once in a while I go back and I watch that video because Skylar Fiction did this is what he used to do, like take the clips from the videos and he'd layer like that nice music behind it, over top of the discussion. And so like this kind of really like like over the top sentimental music kind of playing in the background as this raccoon is scolding Becco over, bro. Like just like there's some weird morals, and it's like one of my favorite videos out there.
So it has a talking hamburger. I think Agrippa needs that one.
Oh, do they have a talking Roo?
No, I'm surprised they don't. But there's a new version coming out. They just announced.
What's the software called? What's it called?
Face Rig.
Face Rig.
But they're doing a new version with up-to-date software, and so maybe there'll be a Roo on this new version that they're releasing next year or so. That'll be exciting.
I'll have a look.
Vincent's in the external chat. He's just like, I've missed Race Rig. No, it's Face Rig. Race Rig is the one that makes me look like Drake.
Bloody Christian Wombat.
Bloody Christian Wombat. Oh man. So yeah. So is Skylar still doing stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's so like I've actually like really like Skylar stuff ever since he kind of like teamed up with the Dr. Josh. Yeah, like the scene, like their two kind of perspectives, they have really good chemistry and the discussions they have, but they are a force, when they're on there together, like between the two of them, and it's a shame because like you don't get Skylar's still very old school in his approach, trying to get somebody in the room and just bump heads on an issue, not like screaming and yelling and stuff like that, but it's not a safe space. It's not a place like where there's like that reasonable kind of like well measured, okay, you go, I go. It's a discussion, it's an actual like good pub discussion type thing, but that like people don't like that anymore. And the only people that he gets that comes in and will like try to challenge them that are really like abrasive Christians, which are generally very just abrasive assholes just in general. They're not the highest tier people to talk to, but he's had some good people in there at least.
Yeah, they're just all ready to brawl.
yeah.
I mean that's something because we've been really, I think, way too preoccupied with the whole McRae saga, and it's hard not to be. But one of the things that I'd be interested in having a little chat away from that today is the case for being an agnostic, because we can, Spackle can sit there and do the side for being a theist, deist sort of argument, and Soccer, you and I can sort of sit and play the, why we don't believe there's a God. But I still struggle on the justification process for being an agnostic, and I've yet to hear somebody present, other than Hume's arguments, Huxley, sorry, not Hume. I've yet to see any sort of real decent. Huxley, I've yet to see any real decent agnostic arguments and a justification of why people could be an agnostic, and trying to stay away from the whole logical argument side of things, more just a discussionary type thing, as we forgetting the B plus C equals E nonsense. I've yet to hear anybody present a decent argument outside of the Huxley agnostics for this, what I'll call new agnosticism that Steve and others seem to be presenting. Is it a fad? Is it a look at me, I'm an intellectual? And my view is, based on some of the reading in SEP, is it seems to be a faux intellectual position.
Well, I think it's like some people like just put it out there as like that. I think it goes along with the people that get really obsessed with like the skeptic like label. That there's a certain kind of respectability to the agnosticism because it shows that you're being like equally skeptic or well measured or well balanced skeptic when it comes to things. but I mean, like, yeah, there's like the two ways that people can approach agnosticism is the like the propositional base, like with any ism type thing, whether it's like atheism or whatever. There's if agnosticism is represented as a proposition, which is that the existence of gods is just not knowable. You know, like it's one of those things that, you know, that's just by virtue of the topic, you know, that it's one of those things that we can never actually have any type of degree of epistemic certainty or over, and therefore that the that any evidence for or against is actually relatively moot. That it's to say that there's, you know, good arguments for it and good arguments against, you know, something like theism, you know, both are just like, okay, well, who cares? Like they're inconclusive. Everything's inconclusive.
Yeah.
Like the safe spot is just to be skeptical. Just like, well, I'm just not going to form a belief in either. Now, the problem that I have with agnosticism is that, and I am going to, you know, as much as I hate this, I am going to borrow completely from Matt Slick on this. You're functionally an atheist.
Yeah, that's sort of my position.
Yeah, it's exactly functionally like an atheist, right?
Yeah, it's just like, okay, well,
it's a position of disbelief in everything, in a sense.
Well, it's not just that, but think of think of what you have to do as a Christian. You know, that like how does your belief in a God affect your life? You know, that it changes how you act. It changes, you know, where you spend your money. It changes the company that you keep.
Kids to school, all sorts of things. Social environments, who you may marry, the type of person you may marry.
Yeah, and like especially like with like behavior and habits, because there's always this notion of some type of eternal damnation that is going to that hangs over you. Like, you know, well, this is a possibility of something that can't happen, so it's best to just, you know, like we're going to alter our lifestyle to fit within the rules that this God has laid out. And an atheist is free of that. You know, they live their life with, you know, not really relying on any type of religious dogma or religious text. It doesn't really alter their life outside of, you know, what kind of like the societal expectations of them are. And so an agnostic who, you know, wants to take this belief of like, well, yeah, I'm not sure, you know, I'm not saying that God doesn't exist, but I'm not saying that he does exist, has very little effect on their life that would be able to separate them from an actual atheist, from functionally. So even though that they claim to be almost like this neutral position,
they're not really.
They're not making a claim either way, they still seem to fall functionally on one side.
Well, isn't this something that we see in politics? There's like a faction of people in politics that believe as long as they pick the center, then they have the best of both worlds, and they automatically assume that their argument's better because they have grabbed, quote unquote, the best of both worlds. They're not an extreme. And we see that politically sometimes with people that just assume that that's the more intelligent choice. Do you not see the correlation?
Yeah, there's definitely, and I think a lot of things in life, it's this knowledge based type thing that, you know, our little world here on the internet, because I think we all, whether you're Christian or atheist or whatever, the big bogey has always been the young earth creationist, that fundamental, you know, the radical fundamentalist, which are, you know, out there in batshit crazy land, and a whole range of things, not just the religious and scientific stuff, but also the social side of things. And that's what we've been geared to argue against in the early days of this community. That seems to have carried across. And I think the word skeptic is such a bad word. I tend now to call myself more of a pragmatist. And this comes back to what Soccer was saying, is how you live your life versus trying to, you know, present, you know, an epistemically based position for my beliefs. And that's all great to understand all of that. But how do you live your life really is the way you should be looking at it. And for that, I struggle with how people can actually hold this position of agnosticism. Because if you're living your life as if there's no God, I'm sorry, that says to me you're living your life as an atheist lives their life. and that's a pragmatic approach, not a epistemological approach or a religious approach or whatever. The belief thing almost doesn't matter. You're living your life as if there is no God.
Could it be possible for an agnostic to decide to live their life as if there is a God?
Well, they sort of have to. I guess you'd have to say they, in a pragmatic sense, because they're unsure or they're not certain or there's not they've rejected theism though, and they've rejected atheism. Is the fundamental thing that they've done is the tenets of theism. They say, no, I don't believe any of that. But I've yet, and part of why I brought this up is I've yet to hear what are the arguments you've rejected on atheism? Because
it's well, first off, I mean, to the Spackle's question, is it possible? Well, I think it's a weird one, especially with Christianity, because the very first step of recognizing as Christian, or like the main important thing is recognizing as Christian, is that you have a belief, and so like even though that there's a certain expected behavior that does follow from that does kind of align with what somebody would call Christian values, the very first step is to believe itself. And most people, that even agnostics, would recognize that going through the motions is not enough without that belief. So like would they pray? I mean, they might. I think it's entirely possible for an agnostic, maybe possibly to pray, but I view that more as a meditation exercise. Like I think that it's possible for an atheist to pray too, knowing full well that they're not actually praying to anything. It just like sometimes you just got to scream into the ether and just see what happens.
Yeah.
But to like the position of like, well, why would somebody like in this position, like, so like is somebody an agnostic because they find arguments on both sides convincing, or are they an agnostic, because they aren't convinced by arguments on either side? And like both of those positions are interesting, because like the first one obviously is that there's good arguments on both sides. Well, I think that's tough. Like that's a tough position to argue for. It's like, well, what are the good ones that you view for atheism? Well, and what are the good ones that you view for theism?
Yeah.
Because like I've yet to find a good argument for theism. I know this because I'm not a theist, so like, but with the position of like, well, they just reject all of them. Well, okay, well, same thing, like for the same reason why that you can really kind of analyze, like, well, why do you reject, these theist ones? Why do you reject these atheist arguments? Are you pushing skepticism to the point that you're unreasonably skeptic, where you're philosophically skeptic? Is that what the position we're getting to? Because at that point in time, I just like, you're not agnostic. You're just, it's just overly skeptic.
Well, I think it's just a faux intellectual position. I think it's playing the look how smart I am, and that's not conducive to a conversation about the proposition of God, is it?
Well, that, and there's so many like nuances to it as well with agnosticism, because like one of the things that you'll hear from a lot of agnostics is that things like, well, I'm undecided on whether a God exists. Okay, I'm agnostic towards some deistic concepts of God, but I'm I definitely know that the Christian God doesn't exist. They'll say things like that, and okay, that's cool. All right, so I'm in the same boat. That I'm fairly certain that the Christian God doesn't exist. But there's some deistic notions of God that could possibly exist, but I'm not agnostic on those, because those gods are either so vague to have very low, like, they to not even hold them into any type of standard of something that I need to take seriously, or that they just, by their very nature, it's almost inconsequential whether or not I was to express a belief in them or not. So I could function just like they didn't exist or not, and the question, is less about me being skeptical or unsure, and more about just me being apathetic, where it's just like, well, who fucking cares? Like if we live inside the consciousness of some fucking giant space whale or some shit, I don't fucking know. Who cares? It doesn't affect my life.
It's a turtle, man.
Turtles all the way down. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just that component of you've almost excused yourself from the propositional debate of is there a God, isn't there a God? Being agnostic, I don't think you can possibly enter the debate, into the discussion, because what are you standing for? And again, I'm being very pragmatic and maybe a bit boomerish for saying, make a goddamn decision for the sake of the discussion, for the sake of having a position. I don't think anybody that we know in a rational sense would say we definitively know there is no God. We definitively know there is a God. We suspect there may not be. Everything points to the fact that, Jesus, I can't possibly think about how a God would operate in the world of the gods that we know, all the gods we're aware of. And it comes back to that faith position, which gives people something in their life that they need, they want, they've grown up with. It's part of their social, history and all that sort of stuff. I just don't understand how you can hold in a pragmatic sense the position of agnosticism, because to me, it's like I said, you are fundamentally a functional atheist, a pragmatic atheist. At the bottom end, nothing that you're doing is living your life as if there could be a God, and you are equally convinced of that position as well as equally convinced or not convinced of the other proposition.
So I'm not philosophically trained, but I've been in the great debate for a while, so I've heard things. But I've thought of agnosticism like this: like the percentage of how much you're convinced. Like, are you willing to put a number on how much you're convinced there is or is not a God? And I feel like an atheist should be like in the high numbers, like 80 or higher, maybe even 75 or higher. And an agnostic could be a 50-50, something lower.
Yeah,
but
the problem with that is that, like, you would think that your position would be, they would get better, okay, like as like more stuff is eliminated, okay. So like the good example, I mean, yeah, trying to say that an atheist, that an agnostic has to sit at that 50-50 percentage, or 59-41, or any type of range like that. That's not a requirement. Someone could be, like, if you want to actually put a percentile, I'm not sure how you could quantify it like this, but like 90% certain that no gods exist, but still recognizes as an agnostic. Like that's entirely possible. There's nothing like about that position, and that's what I find with like a lot of agnostics. Is a lot of agnostics fall into that category. I think that there's also just like a lot of like just poor arguments like that. When people try to adhere to the position of like some positions of agnosticism, that they almost take it like this verificationless position, where it's just like, well, unless you can be 100% certain that the only rational position is to be one of uncertainty, which again I think is not a requirement either. So I don't know, it's a weird one.
Well, I've had, and my dad was this very, very strong Christian, very strong in his beliefs, was horrified that I declared myself atheist, and he said, "You're not really an atheist; you're an agnostic."
Because somehow that's better.
No, that and to hear, and I understood his argument. I understood his argument. He had an argument for it, and it was that knowledge thing. You can't possibly know there's no God exists. We've all seen and heard that argument before, but his was even more almost a hope type position, and it a little bit of Pascal's in there as well. Which is, I'll sit on the fence, and can you say there's no thing of universe? And when I started bringing up, I got Steve once to answer that question in a live chat, and I was on a sock, and his answer was, I believe that there is something outside of the universe that possibly influences all of us, because we can't explain so many things about the start of the universe and how the universe works.
I swear he's like a closet theist.
Yeah, and look, I also understand that a lot of atheists are quite spiritual, and they use the term spiritual, which is to me, to a degree, bordering on deist. They talk about the universe, or they talk about the light in each person, or they have those sort of little bit of woo around them, which I don't really have a problem with. Again, because they're not living their life as if there is a God, and there's not living to a set of tenets or rules or something like that. They're just saying, hey, there might be something out there, and things happen in life we can't explain. Maybe there is someone that's pulling the strings. Who knows? We don't know. It's sort of benign, if that's the right word.
Well, I mean, I think that there, to a certain degree, there's like a sense that people have for cosmic justice. And I brought this up like in the hangout with oh geez, what's his name? It was about hangout.
Smokey? Is it Smokey?
No, the Schnook, whatever. There's a philosophy professor guy.
Shook, Dr. Shook.
Dr. Shook, yeah. Like there's this desire, like even if you're an atheist, like people talk about karma, like people want karma to exist. Because there would be nothing better to know that negative behavior is going to get someone's comeuppance, and you take a look, whether it's like pagan religions where they talk about like the rule of threefold, whatever evil you do gets returned on you 3 times or shit, or whether it's an eternal damnation in Christianity or whatever. Like every single religion out there has some type of concept of this cosmic justice, that if you do something, that you're either going to be rewarded or punished for your actions on this mortal plane in some type of afterlife, or maybe even during life itself. And that is a great concept. I wish that was a thing. I mean, could you imagine, like, how many times have you seen people out there just do absolutely just atrocious things and think just like, man, I really want that person, to get their comeuppance. And it just, of course, like, you can't rely on that because, well, I don't believe that there is this cosmic force out there bringing this balance. But man, wouldn't it be awesome if there was?
Yeah.
And that desire alone is enough for some people just to hang their hat on. Now, is that a spiritual position? No, but I think it's one that allows you to navigate through the hardships of life in an easier way, knowing that the good behavior that you do will be rewarded, and the bad behavior you do that others do will be punished.
And I think that's sort of the basis for obviously the formation of religions. Back when we were sort of very primitive, and man first thought about death and afterlife and all those sorts of things. We see the ritual burials in Neanderthals and all those sorts of things in archaeology. And that's obviously carried through now into a more structured sense in the religions as we evolve in societies. But I think there is a real desire in humans for that external justice outside of our control.
I just want to qualify. A lot of times when you think of the external justice, for instance, in Christianity, the theists, a lot of the theists that we're exposed to in America, a lot of theists that we're exposed to on the internet, their cosmic justice is really God's going to,
smite you,
smite everybody that I hate,
Yeah.
But there is a concept in Judaism that focuses on reparation and the restoration of all things and things like that. And there is this hope in Christianity that everything will be restored, right? Like, and there is sort of like this sense of when you deal with a child who suffers and dies, and you're looking at the problem of evil, and you go, how could a loving God allow such a horrible thing? This is horrible. At the same time, it's like, God, if there is no God, if there's nothing after this, and this is all there is, and there is no cosmic justice, there's nothing for this kid to go on for. You just suffered and died for 3-4 years. Maybe you lived till the age of 9, but maybe you suffered most of that time, and then that's it. That's all you get. That's the sum total of life. Or these kids that are like sucking on the ass of a cow to live just because they are dying of hunger and thirst. Like, I've seen pictures of this. I've seen this. That stuff horrifies me. And then to say that that's all there is. This is it. And so, like, I think the desire for cosmic justice isn't necessarily always just, you know, the comeuppance, but like God, like
The explanation. Yeah.
there are people that deserve more than this, especially children that are suffering and dying. Like they deserve more than this, you know. And I think that might be a at least for me, it's probably a drive for the God belief. I don't know.
Yeah, that
I
makes
will
a
say
lot
it's
of sense.
definitely a comfort thing in some aspects.
Yeah, and I don't. It's an emotional thing, I'm sure, you know. But like it's. I wanted to say like the idea of cosmic justice doesn't just go to
Yeah, retribution type thing.
retribution.
Yeah.
It can go to other things as well.
Yeah, it's so you know again I just come back to that argument, and maybe Soccer, you can play the principle of charity a bit and build an argument. You know, what argument would you use to be an agnostic? What would be the arguments that you would have rejected as bad arguments for being an atheist?
Oh, geez,
Because I can't think of one. That's my problem. I'm struggling to think of how you can provide a justification against the position of atheism.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that they should be treated as equal propositions.
Yeah, well, that's my
Like,
position too. Yeah,
and I think that there's like this idea that like there's like this regardless of what your position is, that there's going to be certain kind of metaphysical assumptions that people make, just about the state of reality. You know, like about like the substance of reality. You know, is it material? Is it mind dependent? Is it a combination of both? Are these terms meaningless things, and it's actually some other substance that's stuff's made out of? Questions of epistemology, questions of ethics, like all these like different positions out there, and these meta discussions can never. They're assumptions. They really are, and. Like, well, there are arguments for idealism and arguments for naturalism, or materialism, whatever. Like, there are arguments for these things. They're all going to be grounded in some type of assumption. I don't think you're ever going to really establish any type of truth in that. And sorry, one second, my wife's showing me something. What am I looking at?
Just look at the oven. I like it.
Oh, okay. Then buy it.
No, I'm just looking at them.
Okay.
I haven't been on in a long time. When was the last time you played?
Like a while ago.
Exactly.
But there's so there's even within these the discussion. Oh, is that my max?
It's
Well,
our max. We get to share max.
Well,
Oh,
I
okay,
mean, is
good.
there anyone else?
Awesome, thank you, buddy. Yeah, so like so because there's all these meta assumptions that have to be made with anybody's kind of position out there, is that I think that the problem that a lot of theists and a lot of atheists both fall into is assuming their assumptions that as the foundation of their very the very core of their argument. So whether or not like a theist or an atheist would know, like that. Let's take a Christian theist, for example. A lot of them, whether they know it or not, will put out some type of position of idealism, and they think that that's just like the state of affairs of the universe. They have no real argument to ground that, but that is like the backbone which they can form any arguments about the body and the soul and how they work together and all this other stuff that they believe in. And then you have atheists out there that will say things like Matt Dillahunty does. As Matt Dillahunty is a naturalist. That he'll argue for that position first, and then anything that falls into the kind of like the God category gets put into the supernatural type of category, and therefore can't exist because, well, the natural is what we observe, the natural is what we have. And then now that those arguments are really kind of convincing, because I think that you have to assume your kind of metaphysical kind of foundation there in order to argue for those positions. And agnostics might seem like they have a kind of like this stronger position where they reject the metaphysical kind of assumptions that they have, and because they can't know these things, and therefore, that their position is more rational. They're skeptical of even the meta claims that we make. But I don't think that it follows, therefore, that you can't know anything. Because I still think that, all things considered, when you have, even if you tried your best to avoid as many kind of like the metaphysical assumptions as possible, I still think that it's, that you still rationally come to a conclusion about either of those propositions that could be supported with other type of arguments. So, like, even this idea that, like I said, I think it's a skepticism, or they want to call it a skepticism. But it's not. It's doubt, okay? And doubt is one of those things, like belief, can be justified or unjustified, okay? So people can doubt things for very good reasons. They can have justified doubt, just like they can have justified beliefs. They can have justified doubts.
Yep.
And I think that there's, that people that doubt things for good reasons are practicing good skepticism. But then you have people that doubt for good reasons, bad reasons, doesn't matter. They think that the doubt itself is a virtue, whether it's justified or not. They can doubt something and not have good reasons to doubt it, or doubt something knowing that there's good reasons why they shouldn't be doubting it. And that doesn't make them a better skeptic. It actually just means that it is a shot at their ability to actually rationally think about these things, by thinking that doubt itself is the virtue and not the justifications that can lead to that.
And again, that's something you see from a lot of people that are just into, whether it be theism or atheism, is that there's either the overwhelming faith position, or there's the overwhelming doubt position, which both can be, in my mind, are as irrational as each other in a lot of ways. The demand for evidence for things that are belief based is a bit of a nonsense. You can hold beliefs without having evidence. We hold many beliefs without having evidence of things, or being able to explain them scientifically or explain them logically. We can hold lots of beliefs of trust, of love, of friendship, of all those sort of things. We base on experience. We base on our life experiences and things we've learnt, just living, being alive. And I think a lot of the arguments we see try to be so clinical in defining things that we lose the fact that we're actually trying to communicate with somebody at the same time. We're very hyper focused, obviously, in our little world, on the arguments and the definitions and the evidence, and having the right terminology and understanding the logic behind it, and trying to fit into the philosophical norms and all that sort of stuff, that we're in danger of actually losing the discussions that happened around the campfire 30,000 years ago, about the nature of being a human, the nature of life, the nature of how you should live your life, which is why religions, I think religions were created. And that to me is the big one for me, is that religions for me were created to explain the unexplainable around the campfire. What is that thing in the sky? What is that thunder? What is that lightning? Why did that mountain explode? Why is that person getting old? Why is that person dying? Why did that young child die? We didn't know. They didn't know these things. And it was that Philip. But that was conversational things, and then it morphed into more of a control aspect on society.
I think, if I may add something, and I also want to make a distinction that I think you were touching upon, but it bears repeating and explaining a little more, the distinction between having a belief which is warranted and having a belief which is derived. So someone can have a belief that they didn't deduce themselves or have any inference towards,
Yep.
but it's still well warranted to believe
Sure.
it. So, yeah. So for example, if my teacher says such and such, I don't know if that's true. I didn't infer it or anything, but because of my general trust in the character of that person, I develop an assent and a warrant to believe what they believe.
Yep.
Yeah. And with that in mind, there is an aspect of religion as narrative and tradition. I think that when people hand down religion from generation to generation, that is something that is not an irrational thing. it's something which is, at least for on the individual level, maybe societies are irrational for keeping it, but at least on the individual basis, think, oh yeah, this is why people have sent that proposition. It's
Yeah.
well warranted, and the thing about religions is, they're the ones that usually stick around the longest. Stick around the longest because they fulfill some sort of societal niche that's worked for quite a while. So if it's hard to get rid of, then chances are it's doing something right.
Right.
If
Yeah.
it,
Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah.
right.
But they also tend to be quite malleable as well.
Mhm.
And I think we can look at just the transition through the Old Testament into the New Testament. It almost tracks the change of society and in the way they talked about people and treated people as society evolved itself in what was the way to treat people and slavery and all those sorts of things that we saw in the Old Testament, and genocide and taking foreskins and all that stuff that we saw in the Old Testament doesn't appear in the New Testament, which is more about society moving away from those sorts of things than a God changing his mind halfway through.
You also tend to last a long time if you go through a long, drawn-out process of slowly snuffing the competition, which is what most of the major world religions have done at one point or another.
Yeah, but there are virtues to be had in being able to defeat the competition. Even it doesn't necessarily have to be it doesn't necessarily have to be a villainous kind of thing.
Max, the things that just the Christian faith has done to make sure that it's even amongst its own ranks, the shit the Catholic Church did to, let's say, the Cathars, which is infamous in terms of sheer cruelty. Just the Cathars. I mean,
yeah, but you don't see any Cathars around, do you?
Yeah, because the fucking Catholics fucking snuffed them like
they won.
That's why.
Well,
they licked their thumb and forefinger and went on the fucking wick. That's why.
A few things. First, they didn't. First, let's just not say, oh, it was the Catholics just overbearing on them. First off, they didn't really have a religion that was malleable enough to adapt anyway. Not even just on the war aspect. It was also a religion that heavily discouraged any kind of reproduction amongst both its laity as well as the clergy class. It was heavily isolated as well. It was very monastic. It was overtly monastic too. They were fairly renegade Franciscans, if I remember correctly. Even if the Catholic Church ultimately did nothing, it would have just died out like the Arians, the Nestorians, pretty much every other
The problem with the Nestorians dying out was that the Nestorians was practiced by people like Chinggis Khan. Chinggis Khan's grandmother was a Nestorian Christian, and so was Chinggis Khan. That's something you don't often see in the history books, but it's so. But we'll never know exactly what would have happened to the Albigensians because the Catholics put them all to the fucking sword as quickly as they could find them.
Yeah, yet there were also reports that they killed their own kids. And the only reason those reports are denied is, oh, those evil Catholics are denying it. Like, I don't think people just react negatively to a group that's just doing nothing. Like, you actually have to go out of your way or be susceptible to a huge propaganda campaign out of nowhere.
The Catholic Church, when the Catholic Church believed it was prime and the correct and only conduit of God's voice on planet Earth, it suffered no one else to claim it had that voice. I mean, the only reason that Jewish people survived that was because it was unbelievably difficult to root them out and kill them. They didn't tend to clump all together in one sort of unique demographic region. They tended to be spread out all over Hell's Half Acre. And many of them didn't openly, tell you they were Jewish. So you couldn't sort of do that knock, knock, knock. Hello, are you Jewish? Yes. You couldn't do that. They weren't like that. But the Albigensians who proudly stood, and they're not, again, they weren't the only ones. Okay. Catholic history is, and by the way, it's not just Catholic history. Islamic history is the same thing. Okay. And for a while, so was Jewish history. Just slaughtered anybody who didn't agree with them. who they thought might be a threat, who they thought might be divisive to the faith. You know, all the major fucking, even there's even sects of fucking Buddhism and Shintoism that did that. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah, go to any culture or nation and attack their prime institution. See where that gets you. Like,
Well,
are we saying this is so unique to religions?
yeah, but
Please,
hang on a second.
please throw on a
there's
government
just
campaign
between-
against any civil or secular government, and you get the same thing.
Yeah.
Go to
It's
I
more
would
along the-
agree. I would agree that ideology is a motivator and an excuse almost always. Like, and
This is
usually like the simple things like it's usually resources that really what people want, but they use an ideology to argue for the reasoning. And if it's not religion, it's gotta, like we gotta fight the communist wave, like, or something like that. It's gonna be ideology next. Like,
exactly.
Okay, but there's no way.
By the way, we
Well,
should fight off the communist wave.
I'm not
It's
going to
not
let
just
Max
that,
walk away
though.
with this notion that somehow the Catholic Church was already established and prime, and these upstarts from nowhere. It's an awful lot more like there was, let's say, amongst a wolf pack, there were several adult wolves. One of them decided it wanted to be without any peer of any kind, and that's exactly what happened. So to say that the Cathars were just this tiny little group of, and they were challenging. And first of all, the Cathars weren't openly challenging anybody. They weren't saying that the Pope was somehow illegitimate. They were just saying they disagreed with the Pope.
No, they said the God of the Bible. They said the God of the Old Testament was a different one than the God of the New Testament, and then they proceeded to denigrate, the source of the Almighty. Like,
Well,
again, attack the prime value in any nation, and you get the same thing.
They committed
The
the
only
high crime.
The only
First,
difference
first,
is we didn't have a check
come on,
system.
Max. First of all, Max, okay.
The only difference.
To say, first of all, to talk like the Catholic Church had it all sewn up, okay, is one thing, and another thing is just.
When did I say this?
Just because they were talking, right? Oh, they were denigrating. Big friggin' deal. They were denigrating. It's like if I walk over and I talk nasty about your picnic table or whatever, you decide that I deserve to die. I mean, it makes no sense to me. And
are you really comparing the source of all goodness and values in the universe?
The source
to a
of all
picnic
goodness and
table?
values in the universe, I thought said that you shall not commit murders.
no.
Yeah, it wasn't a murder. It was completely justified.
Yeah.
Whoa.
First the Catholics murdered them, and then they made the justification up later.
Max, come on, really?
Well,
Come on, the Catholic Church since day one has been intertwined with power.
Day one, the 3rd century was day one.
Well, they've all been aligned in some way, shape, or form to monarchies or positions of power.
Because monarchies are superior to most all other forms of government, really.
Well, that depends.
Whoa.
I mean, he's got a point.
Yeah. Fair enough.
My
Well,
God.
that's an assumption. That's an assumption I'm actually putting on you guys.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
democracy is often just considered de facto the ultimate and best source of government, unchallenged. And mostly it's because people are born, actually, it's kind of like religion. People who are born in a Christian society are more likely to be Christian. Well, so what? People who are born in democratic societies are more likely to consider democracy the best institution around.
And you call yourself history. And it's funny. What was tending to happen to monarchies around the dawn of the 20th century?
I think one
They
way.
were
I think
snuffed out
one way
by
went to.
democratic. They were snuffed out by democratic
What's
they were snuffed out by technocratic super states.
I
Wait,
think-
wait, hang on.
And
What-
industry.
hang on. One Way hasn't gotten a chance to say something. He's trying to say something real quick.
Yeah, I'm just asking, like, what's superior about a monarchical system then over democracy on your view, Max?
Various reasons. One, it's a much more personal form of government. Republics are very impersonal forms of government. Even look at Democrats under Trump. Would anyone say rightly that, oh, he's definitely my president, even though I didn't vote for him? Or Republicans under Obama? It's the same thing. That person doesn't represent me. They represent the people who elect him.
I'm sorry. When was the last time you got to shake hands with the Queen?
I'm sorry?
When was the last time you got to walk up and shake hands with the Queen? You talk about personable? I mean,
You
I'm
talk
sorry, but a sovereign is nothing but a figurehead. Oh, sure, you may get, the modern British royalty may have embraced a notion of video culture, but don't kid yourself. You don't get to know what's going on in that family at all unless the tabloids bring it to you. I mean, and certainly past styles of monarchy, where the monarchies were all but opaque. All you knew, it wasn't. It was God save the king, and the king happened to have a name, but it was God save whoever the king was.
No, let's just go over a few things. The first is, if you look at the approval ratings of the Queen to pretty much every prime minister in Great Britain, or even every president since the start of her reign, she has washed all over them. She actually lived through a majority of 20th century history. There's a huge attachment to that figurehead, quote unquote, over all that time span, as opposed to someone who's just in and out of office representing constituents. The third thing is, well, I will grant that the video culture has really done a great job of emphasizing the whole role of personability. Even in the past, when one looked at their sovereign, the idea of the sovereign was that person was specifically brought up and raised to guard the country, all of the country, not just their electorate. So as much as you'd like to say it's still impersonal, it is far less impersonal, even past-wise, than anything that has come before it.
Well,
and on top of that, the monarchist is far less likely to want to have any investment in sending anyone to war, or
bullshit.
Oh yeah, more wars in the 20th century.
Bullshit.
No,
bullshit.
You're full of shit, and I can prove it.
Max, have you studied?
I hear laughing.
Have you studied the fucking history of British kings? Have you studied? Listen, I'll tell you something. There are exactly three monarchs in British history that have been worth a damn, and all of them have been women. Okay, and that's all the women, by the way. The first and second Elizabeths and Victoria. The rest of them, dudes, okay, have all fucking sucked. They've blown chunks. They have all generally been worse. It would be better if their countries didn't have them.
King George?
Than if they had. And that includes fucking Henry VIII. Thank you very much. Who went through fucking wives like I go through shit tickets.
At least,
but actually, because I am curious. Like, you don't include King George in that, and I know Max just brought it up, like Elizabeth II's father.
They've all blown. When you compare George to Victoria that came before him, fucking useless.
He rose up at a time of a great insecurity, when there was great scandal to the monarchy, and he took over the throne at a time when he himself was not even on the radar of being prepared for it.
And galloped his country right into the First World War.
Yeah, at a time when it was fairly well needed.
Well, I'm sorry, what?
You don't think the First World War was worth fighting?
The First World War was probably the single most worthless fucking war ever fought, with the possible exception of the Second World War. Listen, I'm going to tell you something, okay? You go back and you carefully study the cause of the First World War, and you're going to come up with two fucking sets of words. The first one is boredom. The second one is fucking repression, friggin' cultural manhood fucking repression. Okay? We have an entire European bloc that's fucking overpopulated, fucking over everything, oversexed, overstimulated, overbloated with its own sense of importance, all fucking around.
So the European Union?
Well, they're not the European Union as you and I would understand them now, right? Because they included Russia and the royal families spread out all over the place. They would have made the sons of Saud blush. Every time you turned around, there was a Duke of this, Earl of that, Viscount of the other. I mean, about the only thing the First World War did right is rid us of a shit ton of useless aristocracy across Europe. And that was a horrible price to pay to do it. It's a horrible price to pay.
And And let's actually look at a few other things. Well, I'll even throw in the First World War. If you compare like the worst monarch, Henry VIII, yeah, you know what? As absolutist as he was, at the very least, he didn't change the definition of marriage or legalize abortion
You think
or
Henry VIII was the worst monarch? Okay,
the most absolutist.
You
Like-
said he was the worst, but I'll let you
Oh.
away with that for a minute. Keep
Okay.
on going. He
It
sure as fuck.
sounded
He
like
sure as
was
fuck tried to
about
change the
by
definition of
saying,
marriage. though.
since he's absolutist, I'm not gonna. Then he pivoted, right, Max?
Oh,
Go ahead.
all right. Sorry, do you want me to address the pivoting or do you want me to address the absolutism?
No, I was just asking.
Oh.
Henry VIII was a modern
About
man.
to say, and
Just
then he
to
said, "Well, wait a minute, let me hear you out."
Okay. Oh, right. So I was going to address I just called Henry VIII the worst because Gus said, "Oh, I'm throwing Henry VIII in there as well." I'm going to say he's the worst, not only because of the whole Catholic thing, which I guess isn't really fair because that's going to be a very much disputed point. There's also a few other things aside from dividing England from the rest of Europe for quite some time. And installing the original Brexit, by the way. I only use him as kind of a sign that, yeah, a lot of people dislike the monarchy because of the idea that it's so quote-unquote absolutist. But really, if you look at all the innovations that many kings have brought out, allegedly, none have really done as much innovating or social change as democratic powers. And by the way, if you want to change anything like the root of a country, it's much easier to kill one monarch with a bullet than it is 51% of the electorate and their masters.
That's how you that's how you want to see the regime changed, is it?
No, what I am saying is if regime change is necessary, it's much easier to effect.
Oh my God!
I don't know. I'd be a divine right monarchist if God wanted me to be king. Oh man, I think
sure. But how do you find out?
You were born from the right person.
Oh, I see. So accidental birth.
Oh, there's kings. So there are kings by.
Which means that as it actually worked out in just about every monarchist organization on the planet, you end up with long streams of people who they're sometimes they're inbred, oftentimes they're just mediocre.
And
there's nothing you can do about them.
By the way.
Oh please, the democratic process is actually far worse, and for various reasons. One, a bunch of people come together and impose one leader on the people who didn't vote for said leader. He has legitimacy, or she has legitimacy allegedly, because will of the governed, because that makes sense. Like a certain number of people constitute the whole will magically.
I love this. In this current mode, Max would describe making a sandwich as like, and then you put it on a piece of bread, as if that's any freaking good.
No, I'm actually asking you how to.
Honestly.
No, it's not reductionist. You're saying someone ought to govern, or someone has a duty to govern, or someone has a right over me because of something.
Because
you're being overly reductivistic, and that is not fair.
Because democracies. Okay, listen. Monarchies, if you look at history, monarchies tend to end in a number of really unpleasant ways. One of the ways democracies tends to end is that these people who think it's their divine right of rule often almost always take it too far, and then eventually they piss the citizenry off, and the citizenry starts cutting off their heads, right? And this is or they have some other type of revolution, or there's a coup, and then after that there's this long period of bullshit where the wrong people get hurt for the wrong reasons, right? And then after that, well, it depends on who you're talking, but oftentimes a democracy rises up. Now, we haven't seen too many democracies fall apart in the 20th and so far the 21st century, and I think we might have seen a few in the 19th century. But in the 20th century, we haven't seen that many democracies fall apart. As a matter of fact, I think we can count on the fingers of one hand and still have fingers left over. So democracy is actually, for all of its fractiousness, is actually a very stable form of government.
We'll see how long that lasts. And
Great.
Yeah, and if that is a prediction you're willing to make, I'm willing to wait for it.
I mean,
But
so
as it
far,
stands, democracies are a very young thing,
so
and we are
so
not
far,
at the end of history.
democracy. So far, democracy is
300 years only.
300 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Athens was in democracy for a while. Remember that?
it's two thirds as long as Western Rome.
Athens.
So, you know,
Athens.
Athens, yeah, 400 BC.
Yeah, that was complete. Yeah, I mean, that was a very short run experiment. And if you compare it to something like Sparta, which was more of a monarchy, it didn't do as well. Although great text of philosophy, but like in terms of longevity and governance, not much else.
great. So we'll see if your attitude is we'll see who lasts
Max.
longer.
Yeah.
Max, I would ask you though, at the same point, aren't you then endorsing theonomy of a sorts?
In a sorts, well, I actually don't think so, because I'm actually of the opinion that in any society, whether it's recognized or not, there is always going to be that one ideological value system that will, knowingly or not, everybody has or everybody propagates. And at least with an established church or some kind of religious institution, it can be identified. There is actually some kind of openness to it. Whereas if you have a hegemony or an ideology which homogenizes people, where people just unknowingly think those thoughts as if they were their own, yeah, that to me is actually a lot more scary than any kind of theonomy. And but here's the thing: I'm also not somebody who believes in rule by the religious, which is basically theonomy. I don't believe that the minister should also be the governor. I believe that there should be a distinction between church and state, but I don't think that there should be a separation therein.
Well, what's the distinction
Okay.
if there's no separation?
Okay.
So separation means the two things can be means that the two things run on parallel lines, that one works necessarily without the other, whereas a distinction means you can recognize the two things within society, that one is there to support the other, but not necessarily where the religious institution also does the governing itself. The role of the government is to provide for the common good, which is understood by means of natural reasoning, whereas the religious institution is to provide supernatural faith and insight in order to help the people govern better. If you have a religion that goes against the common good, ultimately it shows in terms of poor governance. If you have one that's better at establishing it, it shows in good governance.
Well, if you have a governance that governs without regard whatsoever to whatever religion, then that religion can be as bad as it wants to, and theoretically, the government isn't worried about it at all because it's got no stake in it.
Or ultimately, the government creates its own ideology, which it imprints on the people itself.
When was the last fucking time that happened?
So
now.
Okay, so then would this monarchical system ideally be set up under natural law?
What the hell is natural law?
I think it would have to be. I think natural law is getting to moral principles just using the means of natural reasoning. And it's usually developed.
What we mistakenly identify as common sense.
Common sense is actually a tool of it. That's how we know. It's not what we know. You're mistaking the knowledge for the thing which we are studying. So knowledge is kind of like the eye. Sorry, common sense would be like the eye, whereas whatever it's seeing would be the subject matter. And moral principles are derived from our common sense, just understanding what it is that humans are and what it helps makes us flourish. And
government, by the way, modern governments, by the way, don't imprint anything on their citizens. I don't know what you're talking about. You know better than that.
No, they do. And
such as
let's see. Go outside and start questioning the legitimacy of your governments. Go outside and
go. You can easily do that. You've been doing. You've been fucking doing it for at least 20 minutes. Nobody's kicked your door and put a gun to your head and told you to shut up.
Yeah, but see how seriously people take you. Not very.
Well, I'm sorry. If you listen, if you have something that works, I mean, look at Bernie Sanders almost got his ass elected president because he was bringing, ideas that people believed in, and it was politics it wasn't that people didn't want to take him seriously. It was politics within his own party that screwed him.
Yeah, politicians who constantly propagated, his values aren't going to be taken seriously.
But you don't get to use that to pivot.
Yes, basically, I do. You've handed me a great example, and I am going to use it against you.
You don't get to use that to pivot, because basically that did not represent the idea that government had indelibly imprinted itself on a citizenry. If a citizenry is hungry for change of aspects of government, that means that the government hasn't indelibly imprinted itself on citizenry.
No, that just means people know what they want, and yet the powers that be still got a chance to subvert that and still have people vote for the common party Democrat line, which is very pro-corporate, which basically pushes the aristocracy as we see fit in business and in governments. Yeah, I'm sorry, it just all drifts back to the center right and center left.
If there is a problem with democracy as it's currently practiced in the Western world, is that it's underutilized, and the people democracies. One of the flaws of democracies, or one of its downsides or challenges, depending how you look at it, is that in order for it to be properly utilized, you have to have an electorate that's educated in civics. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we haven't been doing for the last 40 years properly in the West is educating people on how the government works, why it works the way it does work, what you're supposed to do with it. There's a lot of Americans that don't know the difference between, they don't know what their president can do and what he can't do. They don't know what you're allowed to do to a president and what you're not. That's just two things that they don't know. And Canadians are just as fucking bad. We're just as bad. So this is a problem. But I mean, once you have a properly elected, motivated, electorate, democracy works very well, and it's easily one of the best systems of government out there.
Yeah, and once you have a fantastic king who's just righteous and holy, then of course we're going to have a great government too. Like, yeah, I mean, everyone can say, well, if you substitute the real thing with my ideal, then yeah, it's going to be great.
Well, that's fantastic, but even if you have the most excellent king on earth, I mean, if you look in some of the Qin empiric dynasties, for instance, you often had the emperors there, and this, by the way, this is the case in Japan for several emperors as well. Mm-hmm. You often had emperors that were very good, meant well, were intelligent, but they ended up having to fight their own mandarins. They're basically their own bureaucracy, and that's happened in Rome. I mean, when you have a monarch, that's only one person doing the fighting. So sometimes, even if they're the best person that your god, whatever, has intended, they're hamstrung by the people around them.
Yeah, and no, please, you could say the same thing about any party of opposition. Oh, well, if the opposing political party didn't have any say in the matter, then the people who elect the good representative, they can get the job done for everybody. Like, yes, you can describe the idealized situation in almost any regard.
What are you nattering on about? The basic notion of a democracy is that the most people get to elect the person who's in charge, and that person, represents the most people, and it's generally assumed that that person is also going to represent, the minority, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what you're on about.
And no, what I'm on about is, and it's just, you can make the same argument on both ends. So there isn't really any benefit in what you're saying to your system. In much the same way the bureaucrats can upend the righteous sovereign, so too can the party of opposition go against and push against the better party. Like, it happens on both systems. I don't see the benefit.
Sure, but then I can't remember. Some American politician said, it's the what was this? The best system that could be. No. It's not a great system, but it's the best system we've come up with so far.
Wasn't that
Right?
Churchill?
And I tend to agree with that. Looking at the history of monarchies in general, there seems to be, the country seems to survive the worst monarchs and then thrive under the best. So I wouldn't disparage what you're saying. There's good examples, especially around the 1500s. Henry VIII is one. Peter the Great, modernizers of the country that genuinely had their best interest, the country's best interest at heart, and did something about it. But that doesn't mean, right? That doesn't mean that we haven't had a less rocky ride under democracy. And I think we could agree that democracy may be, whereas we're not maybe getting the best leaders for the longest possible time, like under the monarchy system, perhaps that would allow us to have a great leader for a very long period of time. Under the democracy system, we're getting very competent leaders for short periods of time, right? But we're getting more competent leaders over those times. Plus the fact that because it's a shorter period of time, if somebody is terrible at the job and they happen to get in, then presumably they do less damage. So I think that idea of ruling through not harming as much as is done under certain monarchies, right? It's possible that certain countries have really suffered very badly under particular monarchs because they've been so bad. Right? I can't remember the one that was. There's certainly some examples in English history of that, right, John? And but again, these are just historical happenstances, right? We don't actually know what happened because that's the way history went, right? We've ended up as democracy. It's the worst system of government except for all the others. Thank you very much. I thought it was an American.
Yeah, I actually said it was Church. I actually said, wasn't that Churchill earlier?
Oh, sorry, I missed that quote.
Because I got that quote correct, I'm going to stop this conversation just to declare myself the winner over all of you.
It's nice to speak to you, Max, anyway. But I would agree with this point here, which is, it's not, yes, you can say that under the best circumstances, right, a monarchy is a good system. But then equally well, if you get under the best circumstances, I would argue democracy is a better system. Now, if you want to take the worst examples, then democracy clearly wins that way as well. Right? Under the worst systems, then you're going to get the leaders thrown out, whereas you can't throw a monarch out in the same way you can throw a leader out in democracy.
Can I ask Max a question from?
No. So go ahead.
From your point of view, the reason why a monarchy, let's say, would be perfect in your ideal world, it would be a monarchy that would be basically in line with God's laws and wishes, right?
I actually never floated the idea of divine right of kings, I don't think, in this chat. I mean, granted, there are like non-religious justifications for monarch. I think if you look at someone like Hans Hermann Hoppe, who's it was a bit much. I wouldn't say I line up 100% with whatever he has to say, but he actually has a justification for monarchy that's based off of, oddly enough, classical liberal principles, and I use that term very loosely. I would say that it's actually a lot easier to, I think, in terms of what's called the problem of legitimacy, like what gives government the right to rule over you. I think it's actually a lot easier to defend the divine right of kings than to defend, on the opposite viewpoint, a position which is called a rule by the will of the governed, which is the idea that because people consent to your governance, therefore you have a rule you have the right to govern the people. So, for instance, because people consent to engage in the democratic process, live in society, contribute, they have implicitly agreed and consented. Therefore, the government has their own responsibility to rule over those people, and we ourselves have to just accept whichever rulers we have. But I've actually never been able to find any good justification for that idea. I don't know how that binds us as a duty. I don't know how.
Well, for one thing, that's a straw man.
Okay, could you make it stronger then? I'd really like to hear it.
This isn't about, whoever you happen to find it. The idea is you're supposed to take an active hand in it.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to decide as an electorate who you want to rule you. And yes, sometimes that means that you will be ruled by who you didn't elect. Mm-hmm. But essentially what it means is that you have a greater ability to put direct hands on levers of power. Your government works for you in a way that monarchs are only supposed to. There was no way to make a king be a good king. There isn't. And I'm sorry, but for those of us that don't believe in your God, there is no guarantee for us that your God will be held to any sort of account, or that the king, will be held to any sort of account. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm sorry, but at least with democracy, mm-hmm. Every 4 years, if the guy doesn't do his job, you throw him out on his head and you start over. If people are participating the way they're supposed to in a democracy, right? But mm-hmm. you're a lot more likely to get what you want as a member of the governed out of a democracy than you are out of a monarchy.
All right. So a couple of things. One, I'm not the electorate. I am a member of the electorate, sure, because I've been endowed with an ability to vote. But I can choose. But I could choose not to exercise that right. And if I don't, and I say I don't want anyone to govern me, well, tough luck for me. The government still has the right to rule over me.
You've never had the right to opt out of being ruled.
Then it's not an act of consent.
Well, okay. Yes, but when I say an act of consent, I mean rather than not only are you going to get ruled by somebody, which you're not crazy about apparently, but you're also going to get ruled by someone you don't get to choose. At least this way, you get to choose who rules. And not only that, but if you're interested in it, you can work your way up the ladder and be one of the people doing the ruling. Something you definitely couldn't do under a monarchy chosen by God.
I actually like how you accented God there. I'm not even being facetious. All right. So just a few things.
Master's back in the house, kid.
Yep. To be fair, there have definitely been, just like there have been people who it would probably have been better off if they weren't born to rule. There have also been people who it would probably have been better off if they didn't work their way up and weren't elected. But just to walk back a few things. First off, people even in monarchies have gone up from class to class, and sometimes it was actually because they showed an adept amount of skill.
Very rare.
Very rare, but it happened. Secondly, even if we look at things on a class by class basis, there is still definitely a class basis by which people still move up, even in a democracy. Now, we could say that's more of an issue with capitalism than with democracy, but still, that it's not like we're speaking in absolute terms here. These are just differences of degrees. But here's actually the most important thing about getting to choose. First off, it's not like there's always going to be. It's not just a matter of like the best man wins. It's not even a matter of who's able to convince the most amount of people who wins. It's the people who tend to be elected. Sorry, I'm just getting a bit of feedback there. The people who tend to be elected are the ones who appeal to our most baser biases. And these are biases which show. For example, I'm not saying that the policies that result from these biases are good or bad, but a lot of implicit biases would include our biases against immigration. And you see that with Trump, our biases against free trade, which is actually something that...
Sure, sometimes we elect a George Bush or a Donald Trump. Right. Sometimes we elect a John F. Kennedy or a Barack Obama.
You mean Well, I mean, well, even Obama was still a bit of a warmonger. I'd say that much. And as for, although I do like
Obama did drop a lot of bombs, but Obama also did inherit a shit show.
Yeah, before you go down this route,
and he did add 5 wars, whereas even Trump didn't do that.
Can you hear me, Max?
Yes.
Hello, Max. Nice to see you.
Hi.
Okay, before you go down this route, surely the question that we're trying to get our hands around, and maybe Gus could say something to this as well, is it's that I think we are pointing out on the democracy side, this is more of a meritocracy, right? There is a merit to the people that work their way into a position where they can be elected. Okay, that is some task, right? And they have to be approved at various stages to get to the position where they can become elected as our inverted commas leader, right?
I mean, worst case scenario.
That doesn't happen in monarchies, all right? So, however small that meritocracy or that ability over position is, over class is, it's still there where it could never be in a monarchy.
At the end of the day, okay.
Can I just respond to Simus?
Well, in a second. At the end of the day, in a democracy, the longest you have to put up with, lack of capability to do a job correctly, is the set term. Monarchy, the set term is till the fucking guy dies.
So the first, that's another objection to lump in there, but I'll attack the meritocracy first. Meritocracy is being put in a position being based on merit. Democracy is being put in a position based off of getting a bunch of people, or the requisite amount of people and the right kind of people, and convincing them that you're best able to be in that position. It doesn't speak to whether or not they're best able to discern it or even go past their own biases, but whether or not you're able to convince them. That is not necessarily merit or even attached to merit.
It's more of a merit. It's more. I'm not saying it is just merit on its own, but I'm saying you have to have some gifts, right, for oratory and for appreciation of history and appreciation of goal setting, etc. These are merits which are demonstrated to be the case in democracies, generally speaking, not in all cases, whereas they could never be demonstrated to be the case in monarchies. However small the merit is.
Well, so I would disagree with that. The ability for somebody to do something and do something well and capture the attention of people who would depend on your ability to do it well, I would say that it is a much better exemplification of your merit than just being able to convince people that you're only better than another person, the other major candidates. And that's only just one major candidate. I would say the person who goes up from one class to another in the context of a monarchy is actually somebody who better exemplifies and demonstrates their merit than somebody who does
but in
it
the context of a monarchy, who gives a fuck? Because nobody cares.
Well, it's a
right in the context of a monarchy, the person has whatever. The only way to remove a person from a monarchy is to have a friggin' revolution. That's it.
I mean, you could say the same thing about. Well, actually, I even discussed this earlier. You could say the same thing about a democracy. If a democratic no. Hold on. You know what? I should at least be able to finish before you jump in here.
Do you know how you remove a government in a democracy, Max? You have an election.
No, no. You're confusing the people elected for the system itself.
Let him finish his thought, and then Gus, you go.
Just fucking go on now.
Deidre, do you have like a stopwatch? I do go on. That is a fair criticism.
Okay. How's 3 minutes look to you?
Oh Jesus.
Oh jeez.
Classify in 3 minutes.
All right, that's 2.5 already.
It's max. It's fucking max. So
okay. All right. So I'll just count 30 seconds now. So there's a difference between the people who are elected into government, which yes, you can remove, and on top of, but there's also a distinction between them and the system itself. The system itself, if there is any reform to be made long term, is very slow within its own bounds. However, even however, to overthrow it completely if it ever became tyrannical, or if it's just not changing at all, then people are far more willing to just let it go, be complicit in it, because that's just the will of the people that they have no position to change. At least if it's one person giving the dictates, you could identify the person who's doing it, you could rally against them, and you could completely go against them and even change the system. Even okay.
You mean like with the president?
All right.
Can you?
That's
I think it means like Charles II.
You mean like with a president?
Oh, no. What I mean well, no.
See-
First off, the
see,
president.
you thought you were being cute. You thought you were referring to
the
a king.
president. No, the
You
president.
thought you were referring to a king. But what you don't understand is what you're talking about is if you're talking about removing a person, that applies to an executive head as well.
So the king is the executive. So the king is
That's
not just the
right.
executive.
He sure is.
But,
He sure is.
wait,
And in a democracy, there's also an executive head. There's a president or a prime minister.
So the king is not only the executive head, but he's not an executive head that is kept and stern in a system of checks and balances. Whereas if you compare it to a system like the United States, which is a democratic republic, it's not just the president who has the power to oppress, but also you have 9 court judges who are oracles, who can read an ancient document from 300 years and change the laws. Or you could also look at the Senate or the Congress, who everybody hates, but seems to love their own.
Sorry. Are you casting aspersions on people reading documents more than a few hundred years old, Mr. Christian?
Yes, I am, because and here's why. Here's why. Yes, it's a kind of irony. Yes, that was the joke. No, that was literally the joke.
Well, first of all, your Supreme Court judges, and they're not yours because you're as Canadian as I am.
Ours are worse. They literally read in their values. Like our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, like the first paragraph gives so much leniency where you could just pull things out of thin air. It's crazy.
Yeah, because we want our judges to actually judge rather than be hamstrung by a system that often elects them down in the States.
But we're comparing our Supreme Court with their Supreme Court, are we not?
Up here, if you want the Supreme Court to change, you elect the people who changes it. Down there, for a lot of the now, granted, it's the same for their Supreme Court, their federal Supreme Court, but a lot of the other courts down there, the judges are elected. It's insane.
But I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the Supreme Court, the last one. But
I mean,
and that was a documentary.
On the one hand, we have an executive, and then if the executive makes a mess, there's 2 other branches of government that can check them. And then and of course, the courts are the final arbiter, but only the final arbiter of the law. If you change the law, you will change what the courts tell you. I mean, everybody talks about how the country is ruled by Supreme Court. Then change the goddamn law.
That requires what, a 2/3 majority?
Oh no. You mean people actually have to work for a living? Shit on me. What'll happen next?
A majority? Did you just say that requires a majority?
A super majority.
Okay, I have a question, Max. What about when there's an unjust king or a mad king? What about that?
Well,
that requires an absolute 100% rather than just a majority.
Right. So in terms of an unjust king, one who makes life hypothetically unbearable for everyone. Hypothetically, but again, assassination. Tyrannical. Again, assassination. So there are a lot of. So the term monarchy is pretty big, and as is the term republic. Technically, one can consider the People's Republic of North Korea to be a republic, but I wouldn't say because North Korea is messed up, therefore I have to cast aspersions on the United States. They're both classified as republics, but I know the difference between a republic and a republic. There's that. The second thing is even monarchies themselves tend to differ, and even here, I have never even thought of just having one king who has no one to answer to. Like, I think that systems like the church create someone to answer to. I think that systems like we had established in the Magna Carta, that I think in terms of the development of English common law, that was great. I love the divine right of kings. I just wish people put that into practice, like when Charles II wanted to become a Catholic, but apparently the Anglicans started not liking that for some reason. So yeah, I think there can be checks and balances in a way, but I think that the idea of a king is somebody who, if we construct it properly, I think that a lot of focus can be taken for the better.
Yeah, let me stop you there, because those checks and balances you're talking about, of course, are threats of civil war or bankruptcy of the government or the monarchy in that case. Right? Those are the extremes you have to go to get the checks and balances.
Right. And
there's far less of a standard you have to reach. You don't have to bankrupt the country, right? If you want to get rid of a democratic leader. You don't have to threaten civil war and violence on the streets to get rid of them.
Right, but who are the people in a democracy that are best adept to getting their way despite whoever's ruling? They're usually people in corporate positions of power. They're usually people who funnel a lot of money into the system. They're people, and even if somebody says, well, we're going to make laws or change or use laws to get these people out, like, money is still a form of power, and law is still something that's able to be overcome by power. Whether
you're confusing, right? I think you're confusing capitalism now with democracy, right? Just the same way it is with monarchy, right? I mean, the Magna Carta, for instance, was the the lords, all right, and the earls, the landowners, saying to the king, "We can't afford to keep paying for you, dude. You gotta give us these rights if you want our money to go and fund whatever jobs you're doing next," which in that case is raising armies to go in and fight the French, probably.
To be fair, it's fighting the French, and everyone can agree to hate the French.
Well,
yeah, the French are stinky.
So far, because Gus has just been in the room. Well, I love you, Gus. Come back soon.
Yes, we do like Gus, but Gus is Canadian. He's French Canadians are different.
Well,
that might be the case.
Well, to be fair, no matter how hard Gus goes after me, and it might be confusing to the viewers, but Gus is somebody who shows a lot of love for me.
Yeah.
He will jump down my throat because he thinks I'm spewing BS, and good on him, because you should. If you think anyone's spewing BS, jump down their throats.
Sure. Not in a sexual way, of course. But
only in that way.
Yeah, well, maybe. Don't start, Max.
No.
Anyway,
bad Catholic, bad.
I'm just saying, the swings and the highs and lows of a monarchy are much higher than in a democracy, and that is somewhat of a problem for monarchies, right? If you want to get rid of a really bad monarch, there are very few ways you can do it that aren't extreme. And if you want to get rid of a democratic leader, yes, you still got to push the system to its extreme, but that's far less, I would argue, than blood on the streets or bankruptcy of the country.
Well, I mean, to be fair, if we're saying that the issue is capitalism, then in terms of history, the way that capitalism has been overcome was most often by revolution. In fact, that is actually what many of the early socialist theorists wanted.
Not against democracy, though.
No, not against democracy, but a revolution is still a revolution. That was my only point.
Okay, but if it's to get rid of a monarchy, then you can understand why it needs to be a revolution.
Right, but my only point is, if the trade-off is we get rid of capitalism for our betterment, but we have a revolution, well, I mean, if we're good with revolutions, then we're good with revolutions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what the point you're driving at here. In relation to the topic.
So if I was to say that the Wendy's is 2 miles that way, and you say, I don't want to walk to Wendy's, I want to walk to Burger King, and I say, well, the Burger King is still 2 miles the other way. Well, if we're going to walk 2 miles, we're going to walk 2 miles. Like, my only point is, if we're going to have a revolution to get rid of something, and I want it to have a monarchy or to reestablish society after a tyrannical monarch, well, if that fine there, if that isn't fine there, why would it be fine to get rid of capitalism just so democracy can run better? Because under socialism, it would also take a revolution.
I don't think I was arguing the
Oh,
point that you're kind of maybe asserting to me. I
Oh,
was. I thought you brought up capitalism as this.
Can I
I think I might have misunderstood you then.
I was saying no. It's that equally applies to monarchy as well. So it's not a valid criticism of democracy.
Let's let John get a word in.
No.
Well, I mean, and I apologize if I'm derailing this for something.
That's possible.
I don't know. Maybe you'll find it humorous or not, but I just wanted to step in for a moment of pedantry, because Max, you said if you walk 2 miles in one direction, and then you realize that the restaurant you were going to is like 2 miles in the other direction.
Not exactly. What I was saying is, if somebody objects to going to one restaurant because it's 2 miles, and the other person suggests the alternative, which also is 2 miles, then really their objection applies well to their request as it does to your own. That was something I gave as an example of the form I was giving.
I misunderstood. I thought you were saying you walked to the first restaurant and then realized.
I once walked to a restaurant, realized it was an Arby's, and just walked out. Like that also happened once.
I wish I was at Arby's. Better food and cooler people. Okay, that's a quote. That's a movie quote.
I love it.
I wish I knew what Arby's was, but okay.
It's from Baby Mama. I wish I was at Arby's.
Okay.
It's an American food chain. It's also a very popular meme when somebody goes off on a tangent. It's usually popular to say, "Sir, this is an Arby's." Like okay,
settle down, man. Don't get too wild. This is an Arby's.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a respectable restaurant.
I'm actually not sure what we were discussing before Gus came in and started talking about the Catholic Church.
We were talking about agnosticism, and it was something that Sokka just kicked off, and he was talking about it, and Agrippa kicked it off, because Agrippa actually thinks that agnosticism is sort of an excuse to act like you're superior than the atheist and the theist. And I mentioned, like, there's that fallacy we see in politics of the middle road. Like, well, I'm neither a leftist nor a right. I'm in the middle, so therefore I'm right, without actually really thinking through.
Oh, the golden mean fallacy.
Yeah, the golden mean fallacy, exactly. And so, like, we were kind of talking about that. And it's just been open topic, flipping back. So far it's been that, and then like 2 hours of monarchy.
Yeah. Sorry to derail you guys with that one.
No. It's an open topic, and it's like free to like go with that. And I've heard so much agnostic talk. Like I haven't had a monarchy talk, and I don't know how long.
I was really taken aback when you said that you had been talking about agnosticism. You know,
we went from agnosticism to monarchy, but a little before then, we were discussing the Catholic Church and why I thought we should kill the Cathars.
Oh, yeah, he was trying to justify Catholic violence.
So biased.
I think I was kind of okay. You know what? And that just, no one ever just comes out with, okay, everyone. The response is usually, yeah, the Catholic Church did that, but that's not the true essence of the faith. And I'm like, no, we killed them, and it's fine, whatever.
So when you guys were talking about monarchy, we don't have to talk about it anymore if you're done with that subject. But I just want a clarification, because I came in and towards the end of it, when you're talking about monarchies, you were talking about traditional monarchies. You're not talking about monarchies like they have in England, right?
No, the constitutional monarchy. No, actually, my ideal of a monarchy right now would actually be the monarchy in a small European state called Liechtenstein, which is actually very economically viable. They have very good policies on immigration, on the economy. They even had a king. They even have a prince there who rules over them. They wanted to get rid of their monarchy, and they had an election, and they voted to keep the king in. Like, and he's not even a figurehead. He actually has a hand in the laws in the country. I think Simos would probably know a little more about it than I would, because
mine is somewhat of a anathema, but
fair.
Yeah, yeah, whatever. It's okay when it's a small group of people like that.
I wanted to hit on being a monarchist, though, and I know that you don't want to argue for a theocracy, and you were trying to avoid that and put up an argument outside of a theocracy. But in an ideal world for a Catholic or a Christian, assuming, like that this king or monarchy is a just king, he's in line with God's commandments and blah, blah, blah. I'm curious to know, like, knowing that we live in a fallen world, and if you adhere to original sin, man's heart is indeed corrupt, and knowing that we live in a fallen world with that corruption, and looking at the worldview of original sin, we'll just use that one, even though there's other takes as well, but that's the most common. Isn't it a little bit fearful to have that one king, or do you think that God instates all kings and you should just submit to it? Was it Romans?
Oh, so I think, I think in terms of just war theory, there's also in Catholicism what's called the just revolutionary theory. And I think there are just revolutions. Like, I think people are very fearful of socialism purely because they think it's revolutionary. But like, even I would say, if there's a system worth revolting for, and the revolution is just, join it. And in terms of the just revolution, and I will address your question about original sin, the four things are: is the tyrant bad for the people of the faith? That's the first question. The second question you have to answer is does this revolution have a chance of succeeding? Because you can't just let the war dogs out, the hounds of hell, for nothing. You can't just have war, because war, which is violent and outright and open, well, if it has no chance of succeeding and alleviating oppression, then you've just caused more oppression for nothing. The third, and of course there are other justifications. So those are the two primary ones. The third one is the tyrant not just acting against the faith, but also acting against the basis for his institution? And I forget the fourth requisite, but in any case, I think when the monarch reaches those levels, a revolution is just by me. And to answer your question of, original sin, just like it's not unjust to rise up if those criteria are met and that person is violating God's law, I don't think it would be against Romans 13. Likewise, when we understand everybody as being fallen, not just our monarchs, well, if people have original sin, then of course I'm going to be distrustful of oligarchs working in the background, manipulating the system. I'd much rather have my rulers out right in the open. In fact, if you have a bunch of technocrats vying for power, trying to game the system to accumulate the most wealth and profit within that by getting political capital, then I think I'm actually a lot more fearful of that than I am with one person who already has it all and really doesn't need to accrue anymore because he's basically stable within his realm.
See, I don't
more
think.
or less.
I don't think a
and who also has an
monarchy.
investment, and who also has a filial investment, by the way, to maintain that kingdom for his family. Like, say what you want about Henry VIII, but the reason why he did all that he did was because he wanted to make sure that his lineage stayed propagated and stayed around for the longest time. He wanted to secure the state of England for them. And in a sense, it did work for quite a bit. Like, he didn't foresee the fact that some of them would be barren, but there we go.
Hey, folks, let me thank you for letting me join for a few minutes. I just have a final question. Is Max Saka with a different avatar and a voice modulator?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Max and Sokka can go on like forever with each other. It's like
Yeah.
Star Wars battles.
Yeah, just put those two in a room, and you got yourself a 4-hour stream. All right, hey,
In fact, we've actually met each other in person, and we went out to lunch. I even met Sokka's kid.
I've met Sokka in person too. We went out to a pub.
Nice.
And he met my husband.
He's so different from what you'd expect from the voice.
He's somebody who I really felt comfortable with right off the bat. Like there are some people where it takes a lot to warm up with, and he's somebody I was incredibly comfortable with right off the bat. So one thing that I noticed with Sokka is he can have intellectual discussions in person, and he can swing the other way and just have kind of everyday man discussions as well. And like my husband, is a blue collar worker, and he's not really interested in philosophy, and he's right there talking about normal stuff, normal, like my husband likes to build things and stuff, and they're talking about stuff like that. So Sokka's pretty versatile, actually. I appreciate that.
That he is. And he's also very kind and charitable, even to people he disagrees with.
Oh yeah, I've seen him get angry, and his version of angry is still very controlled compared to a lot of people. Yeah, he's pretty good at the charitability thing. It's something that I need to probably work on still, but I was really bad at it when I first started and everything. Like, I didn't understand the concept of steel manning, and I can think of a few occasions where I've straw manned pretty badly. So, but you live and learn, and I think a lot of people do in these discussions, and they stretch out their wings and learn things. So, it's always ever expanding.
That much is true.
Although I think it's quite difficult to, it's an unrealistic standard to expect someone to steel man everybody else's arguments in this.
Yeah, it's hard.
Terrible debaters.
Well, to be fair, whenever someone is saying I'm strawmanning them, my go-to response, like I did with Gus, it should always be, okay, if I am, then I apologize. It's not intentional. But if you have a stronger version of it, maybe you could share that with me. And then I went on to discuss that with him.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you said for sure. And that, I mean, I've never really thought of you as a disingenuous debater. So I think you're in a different category per se.
However, a different category.
However, right, I do think there's a lot of people in the community, generally speaking, that sort of misidentify a reductio ad absurdum with a straw man.
Oh, Bionic! Funny enough, years ago when I first interacted with the community, one of the people on Google Plus. Do you guys remember what that was? One of the people on Google Plus I interacted with was Bionic Dance. When I refuted one of her points, she accused me of strawmanning her, and I said, no, it's a reductio ad absurdum. And she said, a reductio ad absurdum is a fallacy, right? And then I'm like, what? No, it's not. And then I proceeded to show her articles where, yeah, it is. And then she showed me Rational Wiki and said, well, you see, I was saying that your reductio was confusing my point with the straw man. And then I'm like, lady, just give it up.
Yeah, well, people backtrack better than they make arguments sometimes.
No, guilty.
What happened was,
you know what I mean? Yeah. I think we might have all done it once or twice. I tried to do it. I remember trying to do it with somebody called a certain character called Bell, and I tried to do it with him and thinking I could get away with it. And then Seth comes in the room and points out that no, you can't get away with it, and like nails me to the fucking wall. Thing.
Yeah, I think I remember that guy. I also remembered with him, you'd have to handle him with kid gloves.
Seth? No, not Seth. He's
the
guy.
Bell.
Oh well, Bell. Yeah, we happen to know that
handle
guy.
Handle him with kid gloves.
I gotcha. But for the audience, Matt Bell is doing time because he was bad to children on the internet, apparently, and we were all very sad to hear that because we knew he was a grumpy, nasty old man. We just didn't know he was that nasty, so that's too bad.
Yeah. Anyway, there you go. nonetheless, I do think it's interesting how people will polarize themselves to an argument, and something which I've never been able to. I mean, I recognize that I do, but I try my hardest to be open when somebody else makes a counterpoint. But I do find as I'm getting older and as I've had the same argument so many times, that I tend to jump to more easily. I tend to jump to an answer rather than letting it just come out naturally and let the other person make the mistake first before trying to correct them. You know what I mean?
We're seeing Aaron Raw do that a lot. Like if you ever
Yeah.
watch Aaron Raw, he just gets impatient. Where I mean, he's always been impatient, but like I've seen him cut people off real short, really quickly because he's just like, I've heard this before from some other guy, and he just cuts it off, and that makes it really difficult because unfortunately, with each new theist or each new atheist, each new engagement, they don't have the same history with you, and they're all kind of stretching their wings out too and having conversations.
I'm trying to remember his name. He was really good friends with Aaron. He was a lawyer, Great Britain.
DPR Jones.
DPR Jones. When it came to interacting with DPR Jones, he always seemed to, because he was a lawyer, he's actually very good at letting you talk and then saying, what you said was really stupid. Do you really believe that? Here's like he was very. He had. It's kind of like with Christopher Hitchens. He would pinpoint.
Very cordial, yes.
Yes, he's very cordial when he disagrees with you, and
I'm terribly sorry, but I'm gonna have to stop you right here.
This is what you said, and this is why it was wrong, and this is why you should feel bad if you really believe that.
Yeah.
And I actually
do think that's absurd.
Like, I actually preferred Aaron Raw's approach because it was blunt and I could identify with it. Whereas with DPR Jones, it was like, oh my goodness, he was courtroom trained for this. This explains why. Like he actually could stay calm, and I don't say that disparagingly. Well, kind of. I don't fully say that disparagingly because that is kind of a rhetorical flair you want in these online discussions.
Too right.
Yeah.
Too right. Although a bit of passion also makes it interesting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't mind it either way, to be honest. But in fact, I think sometimes that calmness can be very frustrating when somebody won't acknowledge what you're saying. Somebody did it today. They started arguing something really ridiculous. I can't remember the point.
Were you in a Discord when that was happening?
It wasn't. I was in a Discord, yes, and it was somebody called themselves secular Christian.
Oh, okay. I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, exactly. By which they actually meant cultural Christian, right? So they didn't mean secular in the way I would say what secular means, right?
So, like, my assumption would be a secular Christian. This would be my assumption. Would be a Christian that adheres to Christianity and Christian values, but adheres to secularism in the sense that they understand that we're in a melting pot with different beliefs and people, and when you vote or are in the public square, you're making room for all these different people, but then you in fact are Christian. But they don't mean it that way. They mean like casual Christian.
American culture is actually fairly weird in the sense that it's puritanical while at the same time being very what's the word I'm looking for? There's a lot of license as well. Like, you talk to Americans about smoking weed, then they're like, oh, it's great, it has all these benefits. Talk to them about smoking cigarettes, and you're a smoker? Like in Britain or in Canada, if you smoke, there's kind of a judginess a little, but it's not fully there. Whereas I find with American culture, there is kind of a like anathema to certain things that 20 years ago were just fine. Like, it's really strange.
Like, that's progress for you.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, I am of the mind that smoking's not good for you, but I also am a asthmatic, and so like smoking is torture for me. But like at the same time, occasionally partaking, in the form of like an edible or something, like, to me is not a problem. But like if you were like a full-blown stoner and unfunctional and unmotivated and addicted, then yeah, that stuff would kind of bother me. But just in the terms of the vice isn't what bothers me. It's the repercussions of the vice. So like lung cancer is a pretty serious repercussion. So therefore, I would try to encourage people not to smoke, just because it's a bad way to go.
Well, I mean, marijuana smoke is pretty bad too.
Yeah, but I'm not a smoker.
Right? No, exactly. My only point was, and like the whole asthma issue. You'd have that same problem if somebody was smoking marijuana around you as you would if somebody was smoking a cigarette. The issue isn't. Yeah, a lot of people just don't like the idea that you personally go off somewhere and smoke. Like.
Yeah, although I would say that the degree might be different. I mean, tobacco smoke is a real nasty one, especially when you judge it against the rewards you get for the actual smoking. You know, it purely becomes an addiction so quickly that you lose the benefits at all of lowering your blood pressure or feeling reduced anxiety. I mean, that's not good, right?
Right.
Whereas the effects of marijuana last considerably longer, and therefore potentially there may be a better payoff for it. However, before you go, let me just say, Tony Designs, if you could possibly send me an invite for that Discord server, I'd appreciate that. The Let's Talk Religion Discord, if that's possible.
And
carry on.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, in terms of like my favorite benefit of smoking, I think it looks aesthetically cool. Although I would say that if wait, I would also say
aesthetically cool.
It's aesthetic. It's much more.
I saw that Joe Camel ad, and I said, "Oh my god, I want to be Joe Camel."
No, okay, I mean, there's
kind of to respond to what you're saying.
I mean, there is kind of like the classic Hollywood cool cigarette smoking look that I actually absolutely love. However,
I get what you're saying.
However, it's not worth selling my lungs over. I'll say that much as well.
I get what you're saying. The whole like I love 1940s movies and stuff like that, and the whole gig, like, or the Rocketeer, even like things that are homage to it, and everybody freaking smoked in the movies. Everybody.
Yeah, because everybody smoked, because it was highly addictive, and if you grew up in a society where everybody was smoking everywhere, then of course you were going to get addicted just through secondhand addiction.
Lucky strike, baby.
Is there such a thing as secondhand addiction? I know that there's secondhand effects of smoking that are bad for your lungs, but in terms of like secondhand addiction,
well, I think we need to get Cheshire in for this conversation. Someone please invite her. Secondhand smoke. She's an expert.
Not sure I could handle such a charismatic and what's the word? Oh, desirable lady in the chat.
I know. I mean, her Twitter's broken right now because somebody went after her apparently because she said some things that they're challenging as libel. But my question would be, for someone like her that says secondhand smoke is not a thing. I know. I need someone to represent that argument because I don't.
I'm not saying it's false. I'm just saying I did not know if that's true. I did not know that, and I would actually like to know what that's based on.
Well, when I was a kid, people used to smoke everywhere, and like on buses and public transport. And of course, as a kid, you would take public transport to get to and from wherever you were going, school, etc. And of course, this meant that as a kid, I was exposed to cigarette smoke twice a day. So, of course, by the time I got to 16, 17, and someone said, "Oh, do you want a cigarette?" I went, "Oh, okay." And, of course, I didn't have a bad reaction to it because I've been breathing in cigarette smoke for 4 years already.
So that I can actually understand. When you said addiction, I thought it was like biological compulsion to do it, not necessarily being accommodated to it so much that when you actually do it, it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, it becomes addictive almost straight away because it's such a strong drug.
Oh, I see. Okay, that makes sense.
It also seals like an association. So like, when we drive, we smoke, or if the association is whenever I have my morning coffee, I have a smoke, and then you just start to, you see the association with the people that you live with, for instance, and then you start associating it together. You might assume that same association as well, and it's like a weird psychological habit almost.
Very, very much so.
Uh-huh.
Very much. And I got addicted, myself at a very young age because of because of seeing it around me everywhere, people doing it, everybody I knew did it, but my parents, right? And all of my family did it. Again, I get on a bus and everybody's smoking on the bus. So, I mean, I just felt I had no chance, you know what I mean? Because I had that kind of personality, which was going to, as soon as I tried it, bang, that was it. I'm a smoker. I used to do the same thing that you're talking about, Speckle. Every day I get up, I go, oh, well, I need a cigarette. Have a cup of tea and a cigarette. Yeah, last thing at night, cup of tea and a cigarette before I go to sleep.
Yeah.
Or a joint. Every time I go on stage, I'd have a joint before I went on stage.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that become really dependent on marijuana to go to sleep, or to like in your case, it sounds like to have a joint before you go on stage. It might be to relieve anxiety.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely, it was to start with, and I found I mean, genuinely speaking, I so rarely went on stage without having a joint. I don't know what it's like to be straight on stage, right? Not to have that thing. My drummer, right, the drummer that I played with for most of the time, he'd have a shot of whiskey before he went on stage. Just before he went on stage, he'd shoot a shot of whiskey because he had such nerves about performing in front of people.
I'm kind of surprised. They never figured musicians were the kind of people to smoke and drink and do drugs.
I know, isn't that shocking? This is just shocking.
Let me tell you about the girls that I met.
By the way, have you ever? Oh, go ahead.
Wholesome Christians, most of them.
Yeah, I've often said that Lemmy Kilmister being like the most emblematic idea of a rock star is in hell right now. But knowing him, he's
dear.
also. Wait, let me finish. But knowing him, he's probably fist fighting Satan for the throne.
Well, I doubt it. You'd be surprised. I met him once when I was 15, and he was the nicest guy.
Oh, I don't doubt that. One of my favorite videos from him was when he got a letter from a little black boy who said, all my parents and everybody who I know says I'm white for listening to metal. My parents think it's the devil's music. And then he was like, don't let him tell you otherwise. That's just racist. Hendrix was an amazing guitar player. He was black. And I'm like, wow, this guy is just reaching out to this kid. He's being super nice. He's taking his time to actually build a bridge between the musical genre and a race that was so judgmental of it, and he was able to do that, and I was actually quite impressed by that.
Yeah.
Do you remember the video?
He genuinely was a really nice guy. There was a few others as well. I mean, I met quite a few. Phil Lynott as well, who's a black Northern Irish bass player, and again, he was the other way. He was so out of his head. I couldn't actually talk. I was only 15, but I couldn't talk to him. Right? Do you know what I mean? I said something to him, and he just looked at me, and I saw these eyes, and I thought, my God, it's state of that. You know what I mean? So it's just so bizarre. It's so bizarre that you get this good and the bad, right? Someone with Lemmy's reputation as a hellraiser actually was a really placid guy who was, was nice to his mum, and you get someone like Phil Lynott who's just a fucking coke addict to the extreme,
Well, did you ever meet Morrissey by any chance?
No, I was never.
Oh, he doesn't like Morrissey. Don't bring him up, Morrissey. Why did he do that?
Who doesn't like Morrissey?
He doesn't. He gets real upset. I remember that because we had an argument about it, and I argued that I have forgiven Jesus, and some of other songs are actually quite good, and you're like, no.
Yes.
Well, blessed be his name. But in any case.
No, I was really into heavy metal, right? So I used to see Motorhead like like a couple of times a year, and like Sabbath and all of that lot.
I kind of liked the Smiths. Actually, I still do. I play I do play one of their albums. It's in my car constantly. My dad hates them with a passion, so I think you and him might get along. But but I don't know. Like, there's something very youthful about their songs that I really like. And I'm trying to remember. Like, Vicar in a Tutu is just hilarious.
That's just over my head. I went to see The Cure once.
Okay.
And that was pretty. That was a good gig, I suppose. That was a pretty good gig. Tears for Fears. That was also quite a good gig.
Well, we're sorry to hear. Well, I'm very glad to hear, Tony. He says he's enjoying the lull in the drama and the toxicity.
Oh yeah, it got a little bit wild for a little bit, so it's kind of nice to just have like the old school conversations without the craziness.
Yeah, Max and I always talk about music when we're on together.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm listening to a lot less of it lately, but I still know quite a bit, especially from the time I was 18 to 25. Like, that's when I was just really super interested in music history, as well as a lot of rock bands. And now, oddly enough, I just listen to a lot of Japanese music, especially the stuff I listen to from the anime I watch. So I'm kind of going down the wrong path there.
The wrong path.
So dodgy. I'll send you a link to a Japanese drummer that I've got.
Ooh, cool.
Like. Yeah, she's real good. I mean, one of the best in the world right now.
Do you ever listen to the 5, 6, 7, 8s?
No.
They're a really good Japanese surf band. I'd recommend them.
Okay, I'll check it out. And I also wanted to always say to you, thank you so much for using one of my tracks.
Oh, dude, I loved it.
That was really nice of you to do that.
Simos, if you check out Maudi's server, he's got a section where he's encouraging people to share any music they've created. And I think particularly, I think you're on that server. If not, I'll get you on the server. But yeah.
Yeah, send me a link, please. That would be great.
I haven't made any music, but I have remixed some stuff for my channel, where I've taken vocal tracks and put them over the beats that YouTube provides for free. Like, it's just not even putting it on top of it. I change the speed of it, and I also do my best to make sure that the tones fit a little more properly. And I actually did that with my last. So I have this new channel, John Fisher 2.0, and I actually interviewed a man named Charles Colomb on there, and he's an ardent defender of monarchy. In fact, a lot of the points I brought up with Gus, I did steal from him at a certain point, which made the interaction a lot funnier. But in that, actually, I started off the whole interview by doing one of those remixes and putting his voice from one of his videos on top of the remix. So anyone's interested in the interview, or just even the first 2 minutes and 30 seconds where the song is, the link is there.
Excellent.
Yeah, I thought your channel kind of looks like the retro. I mean, that's been kind of trending a lot. The retro, what is it? Maybe like right before the 90s, like late 80s, maybe.
Oh,
yeah,
retro wave. Actually,
yeah, wave.
Let's see. No, there's a specific term for it. It's called. You know what? It skips my mind, but there are a lot of subgenres of it. Like, there's also vaporwave, which is like more 90s nostalgia based aesthetic, whereas like the 80s aesthetic is like more fast cars, more cyber, whereas like the 90s stuff is more like the stuff you'd see on your Windows 98 desktop. So you kind of mix both of those in there, and you do have a very pleasing aesthetic altogether.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, these are getting quite silly now, Speckle. I like the last one. This one's He's a little bit creepy to me.
This is the one that I feel like Agrippa needs because he triggered Sarah Michelle with the hamburger emoji.
Oh wow!
So like I feel like he needs a hamburger.
Oh my god!
By the way, what's the viewer? How many viewers do you guys usually get on this?
Just
yeah, like 10, 12, and then like eventually we'll get like maybe like anywhere, I don't know, like sometimes I have 50 views, sometimes I have 300 views. It kind of depends like by the end of everything. But like, are you trying to do a shout out or are you like, oh my God, like I just realized I'm exposed?
Well,
like,
come on. Well, maybe enter on camera for a bit. You never know with prospective employers.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Also, flag of the Vatican right over there.
What about the Vatican?
Oh, flag, Vatican, just right over there if anyone notices.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, that's the only real country we Catholics show loyalty to. We're not really proper citizens of any place, and we should be distrusted. Darn
oh, okay.
papists.
I see. I wasn't looking at the camera. I was like scrolling through trying to fix this thing. I see now. Okay.
Actually, it's actually kind of interesting. But in Great Britain and in the United States, that was generally the view of Catholics. It was actually fairly similar to how Muslims are viewed today. Oh, they're not really patriots of this country. They're against our religious institutions. They don't really value. In the United States, they don't really value separation of church and state. Max confirmed Jesuit, yes. In Great Britain, it was, those darn papists. They actually really just want to take over the monarchy again, and they oppose the Anglican system. And later on, you get the same thing with Muslims, just reoccurring today. Oh, they really support Sharia law. They don't support our laws. They're against our religion. Yeah, you can find hardliners, and if you were to stick to the theology pretty well, then yeah, you'd probably come away with that viewpoint. However, most Muslims, in my opinion, tend to just not really care that much. Like, people think that the logic of the religion is necessarily what people have in mind, but it's been my notice that that's not been the case.
I feel like the logic of the religion is sorely missing in evangelical Americans.
I mean, I've always said this, and Catholics are often the same way. There's this kind of impediment to vote for Trump and shun the Democratic Party. But in my opinion, well, I can't say it's morally okay to vote Democrat. I'm sorry. I can't also say that one is obliged, therefore, to vote Trump. I've always thought that was the false dichotomy that was really weird. Like, has anyone thought, you know what, maybe it's good Christian values not to vote, to recognize a false dichotomy and vote neither? And not even just third party, just recognize this is not the system for us. Why are we even deluding ourselves with participating? Like no one ever thinks of those alternatives. Like, I would.
Do they count spoiled ballots in the States?
I'm not actually sure. In Canada, what they do is they do recognize that you are a voter, and that because you're voting, you have some input. They'll count your demographic, and when they see that, oh, here are voters who appeal to nobody, then at the very least they take that into consideration, which I actually do appreciate. I don't know about the U.S. though. How about in the UK? What's the general approach to the spoiled ballot?
Yeah, no, I used to spoil my ballot after the Blair incident.
I didn't know what spoiled ballot means. Is that when you just write in somebody ridiculous? Like, let's say, the presidential race is coming up right now, and I vote in,
I'd love it.
Yeah, for sake of argument, somebody ridiculous.
It's just when, if you don't tick one of the boxes, you're supposed to X one of the boxes. And if you do anything else on the form, it's counted as a spoiled ballot. I used to write in a new box and write none of the above and then put my X in there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they don't count. I don't think they.
By the way, I have to say I fully agree with your hatred of Tony Blair. I think he was a terrible prime minister, and frankly, he ruined the Labour Party.
Oh yeah, hell yeah. Mind you, he wasn't the only one. But
Yeah.
nonetheless,
Well,
so then they count that as a spoiled ballot. And the point is, the number of spoiled ballots started rising to the point where it started becoming an embarrassment that people were deliberately spoiling the ballots. So they stopped counting them.
Oh, I see. And
Yeah.
but by the way, I'm not sure how much of Peter Hitchens you watch or if you even care for him, but one thing he said that I actually really appreciate, and I agree with 100%, and I think you would too, is if the Labour Party can't even nationalize the railways again, what point is there in voting for them?
Yeah, I've known of Peter Hitchens for a long, long time, way before even before the internet. I knew of Peter Hitchens and Christopher Hitchens because obviously they were on British TV. But no, yeah, he's a horrible person. He's a horrible man, and he's got these skewed ideas about what's the word I'm looking for? About power and how it's corrupted, and that's what gets me because he participates in the corruption of power, right?
Right.
By writing these sycophantical articles about people who are clearly abusing the system.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it makes you feel any better about the guy. He completely changed my opinion about the need to nationalize railway systems. Frankly, no, I 100% agree with this. And it's not just in the context of the UK. Even in Canada, we've privatized the railways. And in my personal experience, the railways are a great thing because we actually get to see and experience the country firsthand. The country is wide and vast. It has a fantastic landscape. It's a beautiful means of travel. It's much safer than highway travel, which result in a lot more fatalities. And frankly, the idea of giving it up to private corporations and then just giving it subsidies later strikes me as being so lousy. You might as well just do it directly yourself and have a hand in it.
Yeah, I would probably
Okay.
do all of that.
I have something to share with you guys to watch, and you can share your opinion on it, and it's very serious. So,
Okay.
1 second here. I'm going to screen share, and I'm going to share application window. Let's see, Chrome tab. Share audio. All right. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Mr. Vermin Supreme.
Thank you.
I love this guy.
Has been eroding the gum line of this great nation long enough and must be stopped. For too long, this country has been suffering a great moral and oral decay in spirit and in sizers. A country's future depends on its ability to bite back. We can no longer be a nation indentured. Our very salivation is at stake. Together, we must brace ourselves. As we cross over to the bridge work, into the 23rd century, let us bite the bullet and together make America a sea of shining smiles from sea to shiny sea. Now, friends, some people will tell you that this mandatory toothbrushing law is about the secret dental police kicking down your door at 3 a.m. to make sure you've brushed. Friends, it is not. Some will mention the dental re-education centers or the preventative dental maintenance detention facilities. It's about none of these things. It's not about the government-issued toothpaste containing an addictive yet harmless substance. No, friends, it is not even about DNA gene splicing to create a race of winged monkeys to act as tooth fairies. Friends, what this mandatory toothbrushing law is really about is strong teeth for a strong America. My name is Vermin Supreme. I'm a friendly fascist. I am a tyrant that you should trust, and you should let me run your life because I do know what is best for you. Yes, I'm a politician. I will promise you anything your little electorate heart desires because you are my constituents. You are the informed voting public, and because I have no intention of keeping any promise that I make. Vote early, vote often. Remember, a vote for Vermin Supreme is a vote completely thrown away. I would like to take this moment to acknowledge my mother, who is in the...
Oh,
Oh,
nice.
His mom. By the way, can you play that Peter Hitchens one that I shared?
Yeah, I can. Hang on, let me find it.
Before you do, there was a party over here who ran for many, many years called Screaming Lord Such and the Monster Raving Loony Party. And basically, that was a similar idea, right? And again, he would, I think he almost won power at one point because the people were so dissatisfied with the Tories versus Labour, sort of voting Tories versus Labour, that he got in almost on a protest vote. So it goes to show you, if these people stick around, right, people will start voting for them just to piss off the other parties, So I approve of this kind of mockery of democracy.
Yeah, it is pretty funny.
Is for if it can't even renationalize the railways. The party is for if it can't even renationalize. You have to wonder what the Labour Party is for if it can't even renationalize the railways. There couldn't be a better candidate for it. Some things are better run by the state and some things are better not run by the state. And if one's rational, one recognizes, for instance, the Royal Navy oughtn't to be privatized. And the railways also oughtn't to be privatized. They are a central thing. They require subsidy, just as roads do. But somehow or other, the Tories have the idea that if you subsidize roads, that's investment, whereas you subsidize railways, that's a wicked bad thing. I've never quite understood the distinction, and maybe Ian will explain it to me afterwards. But quite how they hit upon, in their last period in government, this immensely stupid system, I don't know, to franchise the running of railways like a series of fried chicken parlors. How do you think they got the private companies to do it? By offering them very large sums of money. If British Rail, which has been maligned very much here this evening, had had the subsidies which the privatized train operators had, it would have been immensely richer than it was and immensely better than it was. And I remember, I've been a daily commuter for many, many years. I remember quite clearly that it operated better in almost every way before privatization.
Okay.
All kinds of superficial frothing rubbish like endless announcements and cappuccinos, but trains, they can't do them. And we really must get on. Right. We really must. No, we're not going back to the days of steam. This is just foolish Tory nonsense about the subject.
Days of
Tories
steam.
are supposed to be a patriotic party. The railways invented in this country, the most civilized system of transport ever invented, and the Tories are only interested in breaking them up and selling them off. And in doing so, as most people who travel by them know perfectly well, destroying them. I think there's more mileage electrified in Azerbaijan than there is in this country.
Okay.
Wow, that is unbelievable to hear him say that.
That
It really
is.
is. And again, he told you why. That's because he has to commute every day from his plush house out in the country into London to get to work, right? So of course he fucking wants the trains to be cheap, right? Do you know how much this costs, right, to get a rail ticket for a year, and how unreliable they are at the moment? It's well, I say at the moment, and have been.
I have been. I've seen Baldy more than once complain about the lateness of his train or the schedule changes.
And how much that costs to get a ticket is just ridiculous. I mean, it's it's if you're on anything other than a decent wage, you can't afford a train ticket for a year. You really can't.
Poor Azerbaijan.
Anyway,
I mean,
interesting you brought that to my attention. So I'll bear that in mind next time I slag off Peter Hitchens.
I'd like to, like, with Peter Hitchens, I think that there is, he demonstrates that there is at least one issue that I think you could find in common with most people. And in terms of his upbringing, like, he used to be a huge member of the Labour Party. Then he became a member of the Tories, and he was like, wait a minute, you guys are even worse. That he left them, which is funny. And he says something I really love, and I use it for my country's Conservative Party too. I hate the Tories more than I hate the Labour Party, because at least the Tories don't pretend, at least the Labour Party doesn't pretend to be conservative.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I mean, basically, we're stuck with the Labour Party and the Tories, which are basically now pushing Blairite policies anyway.
Well, there's no difference. I mean, that was the big deceit, which is why Blair was actually a Tory. He was never a Labour. And the annoying thing is there was a guy that would have got in just before that was truly old-fashioned Labour, right? But he died, unfortunately, just before office. I think his name was John Smith or someone. But there you go. What can you do? These things are sent to try us, and when Blair did get in, I mean, there was a period of time his chancellor was Scottish guy. I can't remember his name offhand, but he did actually reduce the lowest rate of tax to 10%, right? Which is incredibly, forward-looking for a socialist party, right? So yeah, I mean, he literally was responsible for millions of people coming out of poverty, and that seemed to me good subsidization. But they repealed it shortly after.
Honestly, if you look at my own personal views on the economy, and politics in general, I'd say that I'm like blue. I'd say blue labor would probably best encapsulate my own viewpoint. I like a monarchy. Don't get me wrong. I like traditional institutions, but I also like families being able to live traditional lifestyles, and that means that the rich have to give up something to them. They have a duty and a moral one at that in order to help the working class. Like I think. Like you can't am I against abortion? Oh yeah, definitely. Do I think that it's preposterous? Do you think you're making a better case for abortion by saying we should ban abortion, but also let's not really use those social welfare programs to help moms who are stuck trying to decide? You're really screwing yourself over. And I know that doesn't justify abortion, but guess what? You're making it super easy for them to say you're hypocrites. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have any, I've genuinely, I would call myself a conservative in the sense that, but like you say, I'm a red conservative, right?
Right.
I'm not that far into it that I wouldn't vote Labour given half a chance if there was a viable alternative. But what I really, really, really picked my balls is that the housing industry is so bad, right? And it's so expensive to get a house that you don't stand a chance of starting a family in the traditional way. And it's nothing to do with the politics of it. It's to do with this capitalism side of having housing bubbles, right? And just getting shit tons of people to come move into the country to keep the housing bubble propped up. All right. Now, if you were poor and you could afford a house, right, then you can start a family. That's it. You've got enough there to start a family. If you've got you've got a roof over your head, which is reliably going to be yours for the next 40 years or 20 years, right? Then you can have kids and start your family, and you only have to have a passable job, like in the old days, right? In order to keep the family afloat. But that's not possible anymore.
Man, it would almost be like we could take off stress off the housing bubble, hypothetically speaking, if it was easier to commute over to the country. Like if there was some kind of national train service.
Yeah. Which didn't cost an arm and a leg to get on.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, the same thing, that they did with, working families, right? When mothers were expected to start working, well, you can pay for childcare. Well, that's the mother's wage that just goes on childcare. That's what happens, right? It became so expensive to get decent childcare that effectively the mother was going to work for free just so she could go out and work and get away from her kids.
Personally, in order to incentivize family structures, what I would do is I like the idea of a universal basic income, but I would just gear it towards any stay-at-home parents. And I know, and some of my more traditionalist friends would say, well, why not the female who stays at home? My response is it would be a lot harder to get that through politically. And if you're somebody who really believes that women just naturally more gravitate towards children anyway, you don't need to write that into law. So yeah, that would probably be my best way of making sure that there is more room in the workforce for men to enter and support their families while financially incentivizing and paying women for their labor, which they should be given some kind of payment for.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a request to watch this, so I was going to play it real quick. It's super serious too. That is funny. I worked out the swing, but it's a secret.
Ugh, man. Funny enough, I think that, yeah, you know what? Most internet political shows are like that now. Like, they really predicted that.
I found that to be really relatable content, especially with Trump winning. Like, people said that he wouldn't win. It's just a joke. And then you're like, the silly party takes it.
Yeah, I think with Donald Trump, he kind of showed that you know what? He actually showed that pollsters can't really capture, people who don't really care too much about the process, the disenfranchised. Like, it seems the only people who participate in polls are the people who actually just cared about politics to begin with, or who weren't disenfranchised to begin with. Now you do have that kind of whole silent majority thing that might also pan out. And to be fair, statistically speaking, like 33% isn't nothing. That's a 1 in 3 chance of winning. So, like, people, don't think your vote doesn't mean anything necessarily, like, or that your candidate is secure to win.
Okay, so I put in a link in the side there of Screaming Lord Touch. Right, this is real life now. Okay.
Now it's getting about. I have a feeling this is going to be ridiculous because it says screaming. so I'm just waiting.
Genuine British election. Okay.
I'm afraid. Okay, here we go.
Each candidate at the by-election was as follows: Connell John.
Peace, stop ideal manipulation.
20 votes. Crowley John Heyman.
Anti-Yuppie revolutionary.
24 votes. Dugnan John.
London class war candidate.
60 votes. Edie Roy.
Fair wealth distribution, fair housing
30
provision.
votes. Fishburne John Dudley.
Conservative.
9,829.
That's 9829.
Goodhart William Howard.
Social and Liberal Democrat.
You heard the first time. Goodhart William Howard. 2,546. Goodyear Brian George.
Anti-left-wing fascist.
31. Hobson Philip Andrew David.
Green Party.
572.
Wow, Green Party's spanked.
Patricia Ann.
Labour.
9,014. Martin John.
SDP, Leader David Owen.
1,190. McDermott Thomas Bryan.
Free Trade Liberal Party.
31.
That's
31.
Payne Cynthia Diane.
Rainbow Alliance, Pain and Pleasure Party.
193. Scholar William Patrick Charles Victor.
The Leveller Party.
27.
You guys have a lot of weird parties.
Lord David.
Monster Raven Winnie, Rock Music Party.
61.
There it is.
Trivedi Kailash Shankar.
Independent Janata Party.
5. And John Dudley Fishburne is duly elected as member.
And there we go.
Conservatives hold Kensington, the majority down to 815.
I thought that was going to be way more like crazy, actually.
No, it's real, but some of those names in there, left-wing anti-fascist party. You know, it's just like, what? Okay.
Yeah, there's the left-wing anti-fascist. I guess that's Antifa.
Yeah.
Well, fun fact about the historical German Antifa, they actually worked together with the Nazis to fight the Social Democrats. I believe they were referred to as social fascists. I'm trying to actually remember the name. There was one German who was more or less of a centrist, and I really can't remember his name, but there was a joke that 3 guys ended up in prison. One guy was asked why are you in here, and he said, I was against the centrist party. And the other guy said, oh, that's weird because I was supporting the centrist party. And then they asked the guy in the middle, why are you here? He says, well, I'm the leader of the centrist party. No, that was told so poorly. That's what made it funny.
It's a dad joke. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I miss your dad jokes, Max.
Monster Raving Lunar Party. Monster Raving Loony Party. Ah, dear. Good days. Don't get that anymore.
All right. Well, folks, it is 11 my time, so it's probably about time for me to wrap this up. I appreciate folks for coming by, swinging and talking. And one of the great things about having like an open discussion where like that's an open topic, anything can happen. And so if you would like to be part of one of these, really all you have to do is just let us know, and we mildly vet you. We just want to make sure you're a real person. And should you not be a real person and this malicious in any way, you'll get bounced on your head. But if you are a good person and like to chat, we'll be happy to have you join. You can check out some people's channels here. Simos, do you have anything on your channel? I know you guys do like race car reviews.
Yeah, I do a Formula One podcast with a sensational person called Fabio, and that everybody knows. He's a wonderful Italian. He's an expert Italian because he was born there. And every week after the Grand Prix, we do a little podcast, which we like to think of as funny. And please come if you're into race cars, Formula One cars. Please sub to my channel, and you'll get messages saying when it's on.
And Max, do you have a channel that you want to plug?
Yes, we do a kind of marble racing called Marbula One. I'm kidding, that's somebody else. It's a really good channel, though. It's a real thing. Check it out. Yeah, I have a channel called John Fisher 2.0, and on that channel, I basically have a lot of Catholic apologetic material that I'm trying to work out. I do defend a kind of traditionalism. It's fairly memeable. It's weird Catholic Twitter meets a vaporwave aesthetic, but you could also find some pretty nice remixes on there as well. So please check that out if you're interested in what the not just what the Catholic teaching is, but also what the crazier part of the Catholic teaching is. That's my territory. So well, yeah, we traditional Catholics are like the fundies of the Catholic world. Although we are less contentious with our normie brothers. And I don't say normie disparagingly. I say that as being, normal and mainstream. I think there are plenty of mainstream and normal Catholics who do a much better job of upholding the Catholic faith than a lot of the more radical or reactionary traditional Catholics who go into some very out there territory, I would say. So come see me for all of that. I'm going to start working on some arguments for people who believe in things like sedevacantism, the idea that there is no pope sitting on the papal throne, and also the idea that all bishops in the world are actually fake. That's actually my next topic.
You might be muted.
Yeah, I think you are.
All bishops in the world are fake. I've never heard that, so that'll be interesting.
Well, yeah, the idea, it's actually promoted by mainly one priest who passed away recently. His name is Father Cicada, and he basically said, if you look at the new ordinal that was issued after the Second Vatican Council, he says it doesn't actually meet the criteria laid out by the First Vatican Council and the previous Pope, which means it's invalid, and anyone who is consecrated with it doesn't actually have a valid consecration. Thus, they're not true bishops. But that thing has been around for so long, it means the vast majority of bishops in the Latin Rite are not true bishops, which is a very scary proposition. So, yeah, there's all that.
Okay. Well, I have two channels. I have this channel here, which is Moderate C Word, and I tend to use this more for community things. So like if you want to have open discussions and hangouts, or sometimes like even like a driven discussion, that's something that I like to do on this channel. On a Holy Spackle, the Holy Spackle, SPACKLE, Holy Spackle's channel. Mainly, I've done like 20 interviews with people. It's something I do enjoy, is picking people's brains, seeing how they think, and having discussions with them. And I do enjoy people, and I think it's interesting to compare ideas. One of the great things that I think that many folks in this community have, one, we like to argue, but we can argue and still be friends afterwards.
No, we don't.
I say friends loosely. We can have discussions and disagree and not be like anathema, you know, like.
Well, you could, let's just say this: you could learn a lot by disagreeing. Like I remember my years in the great debate community. One great thing I came away with was I actually think Fabio's choice of cigars, Toscanos, is really top notch. He got me into those, so I'm very grateful.
There you go. Anyway, I didn't mean to disagree with you.
Oh no, no.
Maybe I did. No,
so yeah.
I would just say before I shut up for good, which is, if Gretchen's still out there, I love you lots. I miss you, and take care.
Yes, Gretchen is actually lives close to me now, so
yay.
We'll have to hang out soon. So anyway, I would try to do these every so often, and so we try to not gatekeep people. And so if you feel like you'd like to talk, definitely let us know. Anyway, I'm going to sign off. You guys have a great weekend, and we will see you next time. Bye.